A handful of historical discoveries continue to resist every attempt at complete explanation, challenging principles once considered unquestionable. Colossal monuments, precision-crafted relics, unexplained manuscripts, and remarkable archaeological finds reveal patterns that remain frustratingly elusive. The deeper researchers investigate, the more compelling the evidence becomes. Settle in, clear your mind, and join me for one captivating hour exploring history's greatest mysteries beyond human scientific understanding. High in the cloud forests of northern Peru, where steep ridges disappear beneath drifting mist and ancient trees are wrapped in thick moss, the stone ruins of Gran Pajatén emerge almost unexpectedly. Perched above deep valleys within the remote Andes, the site seems suspended between earth and sky. Intricate circular buildings, carefully shaped terraces, and decorative stone mosaics hint at a community that once flourished in remarkable isolation. Even today, reaching Gran Pajatén requires crossing difficult mountain terrain, reinforcing the impression that this forgotten settlement was never meant to be easily found. Gran Pajatén is generally associated with the Chachapoya civilization, often called the Warriors of the Clouds. Between approximately AD 900 and the arrival of the Inca Empire during the late 15th century, the Chachapoya built settlements across the high forests of northern Peru. Their architecture reflects both practical engineering and artistic expression, with circular structures decorated by geometric patterns and carved stone figures. Archaeological studies suggest that Gran Pajatén may have served as an important ceremonial and administrative center connected to a wider network of mountain communities. Despite its significance, much of the site remains hidden beneath dense vegetation. Only portions have been carefully documented, while surrounding slopes continue to conceal structures that have yet to be fully explored. Modern technologies, including aerial surveys and laser scanning, have revealed additional terraces, pathways, and buildings extending far beyond the ruins first described during the 20th century. Rather than standing alone, Gran Pajatén appears to be one part of an extensive landscape shaped by generations of skilled builders. Yet, many questions remain unanswered. Why was such an elaborate settlement constructed in such a remote environment? Was its isolation intended for defense, spiritual practice, political authority, or something entirely different? Archaeologists continue to examine evidence pointing toward ritual gatherings, agricultural management, and regional trade, but no single explanation fully accounts for every feature of the complex. The mystery deepens when considering how little of the surrounding forest has been systematically investigated. Local traditions have long spoken of additional ruins hidden beyond familiar trails, swallowed by centuries of vegetation. Explorers have occasionally reported glimpses of stone walls or terraces before losing them once again beneath vines and towering trees. Could entire districts still rest undisturbed beneath the canopy, waiting for future discoveries? Some researchers suggest that Gran Pajatén formed part of an interconnected ceremonial landscape stretching across the cloud forests, linked by mountain paths and shared religious traditions. Others have proposed that its placement reflects careful astronomical observation, with certain architectural alignments possibly corresponding to seasonal events or celestial movements. While these ideas remain subjects of ongoing study, they illustrate how the site continues to inspire new interpretations as additional evidence emerges. More speculative theories reach even further. Some writers have imagined Gran Pajatén as the surviving fragment of a forgotten civilization predating the Chachapoya, later restored and reused by subsequent cultures. Others point to the remarkable precision of its stonework and remote setting, wondering whether knowledge has been lost through centuries of abandonment. These possibilities have attracted curiosity, although definitive archaeological evidence has yet to confirm them. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what has already been uncovered, but what still lies beyond view. Vast stretches of surrounding cloud forest remain difficult to access, preserving countless secrets beneath tangled roots and layers of mist. Every new survey seems to reveal another pathway, another terrace, another carefully placed stone challenging previous assumptions. Gran Pajatén stands not simply as an ancient ruin, but as a reminder that history is often incomplete, and that some chapters may still be waiting beneath the silent forest, untouched by modern eyes. As one forgotten landscape fades into the mountain mist, another emerges from an entirely different world. This time, the silence belongs not to cloud forests, but to an immense plain, where sun-baked bricks have endured for thousands of years. Here, amid the fertile floodplains of the Indus River in present-day Pakistan, the ancient city of Mohenjo-daro rises from the earth like the outline of a memory, inviting us into one of history's most enduring puzzles. From above, the city appears remarkably ordered. Straight streets intersect at carefully planned angles. Residential blocks are arranged with striking precision. Sophisticated drainage channels run beneath the roads, carrying wastewater through a network that would impress many much later civilizations. Wells supplied fresh water to homes, while public buildings suggest a society capable of remarkable organization and engineering. Even after more than 4,000 years, the layout feels unexpectedly modern. Archaeologists believe Mohenjo-daro was one of the principal cities of the Indus Valley Civilization, flourishing between approximately 2600 and 1900 BC. It was home to tens of thousands of people and formed part of a vast cultural network stretching across much of northwestern South Asia. Standardized bricks, carefully calibrated weights, and widespread trade indicate a civilization connected by shared systems rather than isolated settlements. Yet, for all its sophistication, much about Mohenjo-daro remains uncertain. Unlike many ancient civilizations, no monumental palaces clearly identify powerful rulers. No grand royal tombs reveal dynasties or elaborate burials. Most intriguing of all, the writing found on seals and small artifacts has never been conclusively deciphered. Hundreds of inscriptions exist, but they remain silent. Without understanding their language, historians are left reconstructing an entire civilization from architecture, tools, pottery, and scattered clues. What kind of government guided such a carefully planned city? Was authority concentrated in the hands of kings, councils, merchants, or religious leaders? The physical evidence supports several possibilities, yet none answers every question. The city's decline is equally mysterious. Earlier theories proposed catastrophic invasions, but archaeological evidence has largely shifted attention toward environmental changes. Alterations in river systems, repeated flooding, shifting trade routes, and prolonged climate stress may all have contributed to gradual abandonment. Rather than a single dramatic collapse, the evidence increasingly points toward a slow transformation that unfolded across generations. Still, not every mystery fits comfortably within established explanations. Some observers have long pointed to layers of fired brick, scattered skeletal remains, and signs of intense heat, suggesting an unknown disaster unlike ordinary urban decline. During the 20th century, speculative authors even proposed extraordinary events involving advanced, lost technologies or unexplained energy releases. These ideas remain outside mainstream archaeology and are not supported by conclusive evidence, yet they continue to capture public imagination because certain aspects of the site remain difficult to interpret with complete confidence. Meanwhile, every excavation uncovers additional pieces of a civilization whose voice has never truly been heard. The undeciphered script continues to resist every serious attempt at translation. New analytical techniques reveal hidden details about trade, diet, and daily life, but the people themselves remain frustratingly distant. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Mohenjo-daro is not how advanced it became, but how much of its story still lies locked within its silent symbols. Until those ancient signs finally reveal their meaning, or perhaps never do, the city will continue standing beneath the relentless sun, patiently guarding secrets that have endured for more than 4 millennia. If Mohenjo-daro reminds us how an entire civilization can remain silent despite its remarkable achievements, our journey now carries us across the Pacific Ocean to another place where carefully shaped stone continues to raise questions that have yet to be fully answered. On a remote volcanic island surrounded by endless water, the ceremonial complex of Vinapu offers another quiet mystery, one carved not into written symbols, but into the very architecture itself. The first impression of Vinapu is one of precision. Massive basalt slabs fit together with astonishing accuracy, their surfaces carefully smoothed and their joints remarkably tight. Unlike the towering moai statues that have become the defining image of Easter Island, Vinapu draws attention to its foundations. Here, the stone platforms appear almost geometric in their perfection, creating an impression of deliberate craftsmanship that seems surprisingly different from many other structures found across the island. Vinapu is one of several ceremonial platforms, known as ahu, constructed by the Rapa Nui people. Archaeological evidence places most of these monuments between approximately AD 1200 and 1600, during a period when the island's inhabitants created hundreds of moai and developed a distinctive culture shaped by both isolation and remarkable ingenuity. The Ahu served as sacred ceremonial sites, often supporting statues that faced inland toward the communities they represented. The platform at Vinapu, however, has attracted particular attention because of its masonry. Large stone blocks have been cut and fitted with an unusual degree of precision, leading many observers to compare the construction with finely crafted stonework found in the Andes of South America. The resemblance is striking enough to invite careful examination, even though similarities in appearance do not necessarily indicate direct contact or shared origin. Most archaeologists explain the construction as an independent achievement by skilled Rapa Nui builders. Human societies separated by vast distances have often arrived at comparable engineering solutions when working with similar materials and practical challenges. Careful planning, patient craftsmanship, and generations of accumulated knowledge can produce impressive results without requiring outside influence. Yet, the visual similarities continue to inspire debate. Could ancient voyagers have crossed enormous stretches of the Pacific, carrying architectural ideas from one culture to another? Experimental voyages using traditional Polynesian navigation have demonstrated that remarkable ocean journeys were indeed possible. Some researchers have also explored evidence suggesting limited prehistoric contact between Polynesia and South America, although the extent and nature of such interactions remain active subjects of scholarly discussion. Beyond these carefully examined possibilities lie more speculative interpretations. Some writers have argued that Vinapu represents the surviving work of a forgotten maritime civilization that spread advanced building techniques across distant continents and islands. Others have suggested that the precision of the stonework reflects knowledge inherited from an even older culture whose history has disappeared beneath time. These proposals remain unsupported by definitive archaeological evidence, yet they persist because the site leaves such a powerful visual impression. Adding to the mystery is the fact that much of Vinapu has suffered from centuries of weathering and change. Earthquakes, erosion, and human activity have altered parts of the original complex, making it difficult to reconstruct exactly how it once appeared. Every carefully placed stone becomes both evidence and uncertainty, preserving clues while withholding complete answers. Standing before the silent platform, with the Pacific stretching endlessly beyond the horizon, it becomes difficult not to wonder how many stories have vanished with the generations who built it. Vinapu continues to invite careful study, not because it offers easy conclusions, but because its quiet precision still encourages one enduring question. What knowledge, if any, remains hidden within those perfectly joined stones? As Vinapu fades behind us, another landscape invites a different kind of investigation. Instead of isolated stone platforms standing beside an endless ocean, we arrive in a realm of towering mountains, dense cloud forests, and rivers that disappear into deep canyons. Here, the mystery is not defined by precision-cut masonry alone, but by a kingdom that refused to surrender, a city that seemed to dissolve into the wilderness, and a history that remained hidden for centuries. Deep within the eastern Andes of Peru lies the region known as Vilcabamba. Rugged peaks rise above rolling blankets of cloud, while thick tropical vegetation covers steep slopes that are difficult to cross even with modern equipment. Ancient footpaths weave through forests where orchids cling to moss-covered trees and waterfalls plunge into narrow valleys. The terrain feels almost designed to conceal its secrets. Even today, many parts of the region remain accessible only after long journeys on foot, following routes that have changed little since the time of the Inca. Unlike Machu Picchu, whose dramatic terraces have become recognized around the world, Vilcabamba is not a single monument. It is an entire mountainous region containing several important archaeological sites, hidden settlements, agricultural terraces, ceremonial structures, and forgotten roads. Together, they tell the story of the final chapter of the Inca Empire, a chapter that continued long after the arrival of Spanish conquistadors. To understand the mystery of Vilcabamba, it is necessary to return to the turbulent 16th century. After the capture of the Inca Emperor Atahualpa in 1532 and the rapid expansion of Spanish control throughout the Andes, much of the empire fell under foreign occupation. Yet resistance did not disappear. Instead, members of the royal family withdrew into the remote mountains west of the Amazon basin, establishing what historians now call the Neo-Inca state. Its center lay somewhere within the rugged Vilcabamba region. Protected by unforgiving geography, dense forests, and narrow mountain passes, this hidden kingdom survived for nearly 4 decades after the fall of Cusco. From these isolated valleys, Inca rulers continued governing their remaining territories, preserving traditions, conducting diplomacy, and organizing military resistance. The first ruler of this final stronghold was Manco Inca Yupanqui. Originally installed as a puppet emperor by the Spanish, Manco eventually rebelled after enduring mistreatment and realizing that cooperation offered little future for his people. Following a massive uprising around Cusco, he retreated into the mountains with loyal followers, transforming Vilcabamba into the heart of continued resistance. For decades, Spanish expeditions attempted to locate and conquer this elusive refuge. The landscape itself became one of the empire's greatest allies. Steep ravines, swollen rivers, and heavily forested slopes slowed invading forces at every turn. Supply lines became difficult to maintain. Familiar roads disappeared beneath vegetation. Every valley seemed capable of concealing another settlement beyond the next ridge. Historical accounts describe Vilcabamba as a functioning capital rather than a desperate refuge. Fields continued producing crops. Religious ceremonies remained active. Administrative systems survived. Messengers traveled along mountain paths connecting isolated communities. Yet remarkably little was known about its precise location for centuries. After the Spanish finally captured the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, in 1572, the Neo-Inca state came to an end. The city itself gradually faded from historical memory. Its exact location became one of South America's greatest archaeological puzzles. For generations, explorers searched the mountains using fragments of colonial chronicles, indigenous traditions, and incomplete maps. Dense vegetation steadily reclaimed abandoned structures, erasing visible traces of roads, terraces, and buildings. When American explorer Hiram Bingham entered the Andes in the early 20th century, he believed he had discovered the legendary lost city of Vilcabamba. The spectacular ruins he documented became internationally famous under another name, Machu Picchu. For years, many accepted this identification. The dramatic setting certainly seemed appropriate. Hidden among towering peaks, surrounded by breathtaking scenery, Machu Picchu appeared to fit the image of a forgotten royal refuge. Yet questions gradually emerged. Descriptions left by Spanish chroniclers failed to match certain geographical details. Distances seemed inconsistent. Accounts mentioning surrounding valleys and nearby settlements pointed elsewhere. As archaeological research expanded throughout the 20th century, attention shifted toward another site known as Espiritu Pampa. Located deeper within the tropical forests of the Vilcabamba region, Espiritu Pampa occupies a lower elevation than Machu Picchu and aligns far more closely with historical descriptions preserved in colonial records. Excavations uncovered extensive Inca architecture, ceremonial spaces, agricultural terraces, and evidence of prolonged occupation. Today, most historians identify Espiritu Pampa as the final capital of the Neo-Inca state. Yet, even this conclusion leaves many mysteries unresolved. The broader Vilcabamba region contains numerous archaeological sites still only partially explored. Remote sensing technologies continue identifying previously undocumented terraces, roads, and settlements concealed beneath forest canopies. Every expedition expands understanding while simultaneously revealing how incomplete current knowledge remains. Many structures continue disappearing beneath advancing vegetation almost as quickly as they are documented. Nature has become both protector and obstacle. The forests preserve fragile remains from looting and development, while making archaeological investigation extraordinarily difficult. Beyond the documented history lies another layer of enduring intrigue. Spanish chronicles frequently describe Vilcabamba as possessing immense ceremonial importance. Temples housed sacred objects carried from older imperial centers. Priests continued performing rituals rooted in Inca cosmology. Royal lineage remained central to political authority. Yet, relatively little survives of these ceremonial traditions in physical form. Were sacred objects deliberately hidden before Spanish forces arrived? Were they removed deeper into the mountains by loyal followers, or were many simply destroyed during the final conquest? One of the most persistent legends concerns the lost treasures of the Inca. Stories describe enormous quantities of gold, silver, ceremonial artifacts, and royal regalia disappearing into the Andes rather than falling into Spanish hands. According to some traditions, trusted guardians concealed these valuables within remote caves, hidden valleys, or secret temples somewhere beyond the reach of invading armies. No verified evidence confirms these accounts. Nevertheless, the legends continue attracting explorers, treasure hunters, and researchers alike. The geography itself encourages such speculation. Countless caves remain unexplored. Ancient pathways disappear into forests where few people travel. Mountain ridges conceal valleys invisible from surrounding peaks. Even modern satellite imagery struggles beneath thick vegetation. Could forgotten ceremonial complexes still await discovery? Might entire settlements remain hidden beneath centuries of accumulated forest growth? Recent archaeological work suggests such possibilities cannot be dismissed entirely. LiDAR technology, capable of penetrating forest canopies through laser mapping, has transformed archaeological exploration worldwide. Although surveys within the broader Andean region continue expanding, each new dataset reveals landscapes far more complex than previously imagined. Terraces extend farther than expected. Ancient roads connect distant settlements. Artificial modifications reshape hillsides once assumed to be entirely natural. Vilcabamba appears increasingly as a vast cultural landscape rather than an isolated city. The human stories surrounding its final years remain equally compelling. Following Manco Inca's assassination in 1544, leadership passed through several rulers who continued balancing diplomacy and resistance despite growing Spanish pressure. The last emperor, Tupac Amaru, inherited a kingdom already surrounded by expanding colonial authority. When Spanish forces finally launched their decisive campaign in 1572, the remaining resistance collapsed after decades of survival against overwhelming odds. Captured and transported to Cusco, Tupac Amaru was executed publicly. His death marked not only the end of organized Inca political independence, but also the beginning of centuries during which Vilcabamba itself slowly disappeared into memory. Even after its rediscovery, questions persisted regarding the region's true scale. How many communities supported the Neo-Inca state? How extensive were its agricultural systems? What relationships existed between remote mountain settlements and lower tropical valleys? Archaeological evidence increasingly suggests sophisticated adaptation to multiple environments. Highland farming blended with access to lowland resources, creating resilient economic networks capable of supporting long-term occupation despite isolation. This adaptability may explain how the Neo-Inca state survived for so many years after the empire's apparent collapse. Another fascinating aspect involves communication. The Inca road system ranks among the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient Americas, stretching thousands of kilometers across mountains, deserts, and forests. Within Vilcabamba, remnants of these roads continue emerging from beneath vegetation, linking ceremonial centers, agricultural terraces, and defensive positions. How many routes remain undiscovered? How many bridges once crossed rivers that have since changed course? How many messages traveled these paths during the empire's final years? Independent researchers occasionally propose more speculative interpretations. Some imagine entire hidden cities still awaiting discovery somewhere beyond the mapped archaeological zones. Others suggest colonial records intentionally obscured locations to prevent surviving Inca loyalists from returning to sacred sites. A few even argue that oral traditions preserve fragments of forgotten landscapes modern archaeology has yet to identify. These ideas remain unproven. Still, history offers numerous examples of remarkable discoveries emerging from places once considered thoroughly explored. Only within recent decades have technologies such as LiDAR dramatically expanded archaeologists' ability to identify concealed structures beneath dense vegetation. The possibility of future discoveries remains very real. Standing within the forests of Vilcabamba today, silence dominates the landscape. Wind moves gently through towering trees. Rivers continue carving their way toward the Amazon basin, just as they did centuries ago. Moss slowly blankets carefully shaped stone walls. Ancient terraces merge almost seamlessly with surrounding hillsides. Unlike many famous archaeological sites restored for visitors, much of Vilcabamba retains the atmosphere of an unfinished investigation. Every ruined structure seems connected to another hidden beyond the trees. Every documented pathway hints at additional routes still concealed beneath roots and fallen leaves. Every historical account appears to reveal only part of a much larger story. Perhaps that is what makes Vilcabamba so enduringly fascinating. It is not simply the final refuge of an empire or the setting for one of history's longest searches for a lost capital. It is a landscape where verified history and unanswered questions continue to exist side by side. Even after centuries of exploration, the mountains still guard much of their past with remarkable patience, leaving us to wonder whether the greatest discovery in Vilcabamba has yet to emerge from the forest. Leaving behind the mist-covered valleys of Vilcabamba, our journey carries us to a very different landscape, where broad savannas replace mountain forests and ancient trade routes stretch toward distant horizons. Here, another forgotten center of power rises from the earth, not hidden by towering peaks, but by centuries of silence. Its story survived in scattered traditions, weathered artifacts, and a solitary hill that overlooks the meeting point of great rivers. Like the mysteries we've explored so far, Mapungubwe Hill reminds us that history often conceals its greatest chapters in places few people think to look. Near the point where the Limpopo and Shashe rivers converge, on the border region shared by modern South Africa, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, stands Mapungubwe Hill. Rising abruptly above the surrounding plains, the sandstone formation appears almost detached from the landscape around it. Steep cliffs protect its summit on nearly every side, giving it the appearance of a naturally fortified sanctuary. During sunrise and sunset, the hill glows with warm shades of amber and deep red, while long shadows stretch across the dry grasslands below. At first glance, it seems like an isolated geological feature. Yet, beneath its rocky surface lies the story of one of Africa's earliest known kingdoms, a civilization that flourished centuries before European explorers reached southern Africa, and one that fundamentally changed historians' understanding of the continent's medieval past. Archaeologists believe Mapungubwe reached its height between approximately AD 1220 and AD 1300. Although its period of prominence lasted little more than a century, its influence extended far beyond the hill itself. The settlement became the center of a sophisticated kingdom connected to regional communities and international trade networks that reached across the Indian Ocean. For many years, few outside local communities knew the significance of the hill. Its steep summit discouraged casual visitors, while generations of oral tradition often regarded the location with reverence. Some accounts described it as a sacred place associated with ancestral spirits. Others suggested it should remain undisturbed out of respect for those who had once ruled there. Modern archaeological attention began in the early 20th century after reports of unusual artifacts reached researchers. Excavations soon revealed something extraordinary. Stone walls emerged from beneath layers of soil. Fragments of imported glass beads appeared among the remains. Delicate ceramics reflected long-distance exchange. Most remarkable of all were objects fashioned from gold. Among them was the now famous golden rhinoceros, created by carefully wrapping thin sheets of hammered gold around a carved wooden core. Although time had consumed the wood itself, the gold retained the shape of the animal with astonishing elegance. Alongside it were gold ornaments, beads, ceremonial objects, and evidence of skilled metalworking that demonstrated remarkable craftsmanship. The discovery challenged long-standing assumptions. For decades, outdated colonial narratives had underestimated the complexity of pre-colonial African societies, often dismissing evidence of advanced political organization and international commerce. Mapungubwe demonstrated something very different. Here stood clear evidence of a wealthy kingdom with organized leadership, specialized artisans, extensive trade, and sophisticated social structures centuries before European colonial expansion. The hill itself appears to have served an important symbolic role. Unlike earlier settlements where leaders lived among ordinary residents, Mapungubwe introduced a striking separation between rulers and the wider population. Archaeological evidence suggests members of the royal elite occupied the summit, while most people lived below. This physical elevation may have reflected political authority, religious significance, or both. The arrangement marked an important transformation in regional society. Power was no longer expressed solely through personal influence or military strength. Instead, authority became associated with sacred geography. The hill itself became a symbol of leadership. What ceremonies unfolded upon its summit remains uncertain. Archaeologists have identified burials belonging to high-status individuals accompanied by valuable grave goods. Gold ornaments, ivory objects, and imported materials suggest these people occupied exceptional positions within society. Yet the rituals surrounding their lives and deaths remain largely unknown. No written records survive to describe royal ceremonies. No inscriptions explain religious beliefs. No contemporary chronicles identify individual rulers. Instead, researchers reconstruct the kingdom through architecture, artifacts, environmental evidence, and comparisons with neighboring cultures. One of Mapungubwe's most fascinating mysteries involves the scale of its trade connections. Imported glass beads discovered at the site originated from manufacturing centers thousands of kilometers away, likely passing through East African ports connected to merchants sailing the Indian Ocean. Fragments of Chinese ceramics have also been uncovered, indicating participation in commercial networks extending across Asia, Arabia, and Eastern Africa. These discoveries reveal a kingdom far from isolated. Instead, Mapungubwe occupied a strategic position within an interconnected world. Gold, ivory, animal products, and other valuable resources likely traveled outward from southern Africa, while luxury goods arrived in return. Exactly how this trade was organized remains only partially understood. Who controlled these exchanges? Did royal officials oversee commerce directly? Were independent merchant families responsible for maintaining distant connections? Or did neighboring communities participate together in regional trading systems that have yet to be fully reconstructed? The landscape itself may offer clues. The surrounding valleys provided fertile agricultural land capable of supporting large populations. Seasonal rivers supplied water, while nearby grazing areas sustained cattle, an important source of wealth and social status throughout the region. Control over these resources may have strengthened the authority of the kingdom's rulers. Yet environmental conditions also raise important questions. Around the beginning of the 14th century, Mapungubwe declined. Most archaeologists believe changing climate played a significant role. Evidence suggests prolonged droughts reduced agricultural productivity, making it increasingly difficult to sustain large populations. As rainfall patterns shifted, political and economic power gradually moved northward toward Great Zimbabwe, another remarkable center that would dominate the region in later centuries. This explanation is widely accepted. Even so, it may represent only part of the story. Did environmental pressures alone cause such an important kingdom to fade? Could changing trade routes have redirected wealth elsewhere? Might political rivalries or internal transformations have accelerated the transition? The archaeological record offers valuable evidence but not complete certainty. Another enduring mystery surrounds the golden artifacts themselves. The famous rhinoceros has become an international symbol of Mapungubwe, yet its precise meaning remains uncertain. Was it a royal emblem, a ceremonial offering, a representation of power, fertility, leadership, or spiritual authority? Rhinoceroses occupied an important place within the natural world of southern Africa, admired for their immense strength and imposing presence. Whether these qualities carried symbolic meaning within Mapungubwe's belief system remains open to interpretation. Other gold objects raise similar questions. Some appear decorative, others seem ritualistic. Without written explanations, their original significance remains just beyond reach. The hill has also inspired numerous local traditions passed from one generation to the next. Some stories describe hidden chambers concealed within the rock. Others speak of ancestral guardians watching over sacred places. Legends occasionally mention treasures still resting somewhere beneath the earth, protected not by elaborate traps, but by the enduring respect local communities have shown toward the site for centuries. Modern archaeology has uncovered no evidence supporting tales of secret vaults filled with unimaginable wealth. Yet many areas surrounding the hill remain only partially investigated. The landscape continues revealing new information as research progresses. Recent scientific techniques have expanded understanding of the broader kingdom. Remote sensing, environmental reconstruction, and refined dating methods suggest that Mapungubwe formed part of a much larger settlement system extending well beyond the hill itself. Villages, agricultural fields, cattle enclosures, and production areas spread across the surrounding landscape, creating an organized network rather than an isolated ceremonial center. This broader perspective changes how researchers view the kingdom. Instead of focusing solely on the summit, attention increasingly turns toward the people living below. How were communities organized? How did farmers, herders, metalworkers, traders, and spiritual leaders interact? What daily routines supported the prosperity visible in elite burials? The answers remain incomplete. Mapungubwe also occupies an important place in discussions about the development of social complexity across southern Africa. Its emergence demonstrates that large centralized kingdoms evolved through local innovation while participating in extensive international exchange. Rather than existing at the edge of history, Mapungubwe stood firmly within a dynamic world connected by commerce, migration, diplomacy, and cultural interaction. Independent researchers occasionally move beyond mainstream interpretations. Some speculate that undiscovered ceremonial complexes remain hidden beneath surrounding plains. Others wonder whether extensive underground storage chambers or royal burial sites await future excavation. A few propose that oral traditions preserve memories of structures that have not yet been identified archaeologically. Such ideas remain speculative. Nevertheless, history repeatedly reminds us that important discoveries often emerge from places long considered thoroughly explored. Advances in archaeological technology continue revealing settlements invisible from the ground, while careful excavations uncover fragile evidence overlooked by earlier generations. Standing atop Mapungubwe Hill today, the view stretches across rivers that have flowed through this landscape for countless centuries. Winds move gently through the grasses below, just as they did when traders arrived carrying distant goods and royal ceremonies unfolded upon the summit. The stone walls have weathered, the wooden buildings have vanished, and the voices of the kingdom have long since fallen silent. Yet the hill itself continues to watch over the land, preserving fragments of a civilization whose achievements are only gradually coming into sharper focus. Every artifact recovered adds another piece to the story, but every unanswered question suggests that beneath the quiet earth of Mapungubwe, more chapters may still be waiting for the moment they are finally brought back into the light. From the windswept summit of Mapungubwe Hill, our journey crosses continents once again, arriving in the towering Andes of northern Peru. Here, another forgotten center of power rises above the landscape. Its immense stone walls overlooking valleys that have witnessed countless generations come and go. Unlike cities reclaimed entirely by dense forest or buried beneath drifting sand, Marcahuamachuco has remained visible for centuries. Yet, despite its commanding presence, many of its greatest secrets continue to resist explanation, inviting archaeologists to piece together the story of a civilization that flourished long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Perched more than 3,600 meters above sea level, Marcahuamachuco occupies an elongated plateau surrounded by steep cliffs that drop dramatically into the valleys below. From a distance, the site appears almost like a natural fortress carved directly into the mountaintop. Thick stone walls trace the edges of the plateau, while enormous circular and rectangular structures emerge from the rugged terrain. The wind rarely falls silent here. It sweeps through broken corridors, across weathered towers, and over grasslands that stretch toward distant mountain ranges, creating an atmosphere where every ruin seems suspended between history and legend. The scale of Marcahuamachuco is immediately striking. Unlike many smaller ceremonial centers scattered throughout the Andes, this was a major urban settlement. Stone enclosures, defensive walls, plazas, terraces, and monumental buildings cover an extensive area, suggesting that thousands of people once lived and worked upon this isolated plateau. Yet, remarkably, the civilization responsible for constructing much of the site remains only partially understood. Archaeologists believe Marcahuamachuco developed between approximately AD 400 and AD 800, reaching its greatest prominence during a period when several regional cultures competed for influence throughout the central Andes. The settlement is generally associated with a culture known today as the Huamachuco tradition, although its political organization and cultural identity continued to be subjects of ongoing research. Unlike the Inca, whose history survives through Spanish chronicles and archaeological evidence, the people of Marcahuamachuco left behind no deciphered written records. Their voices survive almost entirely through stone. The location itself seems carefully chosen. Natural cliffs protect much of the plateau, reducing the need for extensive defensive construction in many areas. Where the landscape offered easier access, builders reinforced vulnerable approaches with thick walls and carefully designed gateways. Was security the primary concern? Or did the elevated setting carry deeper symbolic meaning? Throughout the Andes, mountains often held profound spiritual significance. High places were frequently associated with powerful deities, sacred ancestors, and ceremonial traditions linked to the surrounding landscape. Marcahuamachuco may have combined practical defense with religious importance, creating a center where political authority and spiritual life became closely connected. Among the site's most intriguing features are its towering stone enclosures, sometimes referred to as galleries or monumental compounds. Their massive walls rise several meters high, enclosing narrow interior spaces whose original purpose remains uncertain. Some archaeologists interpret these structures as elite residences or administrative centers. Others suggest ceremonial functions. A few believe certain compounds may have served as repositories for the remains of important individuals, reflecting complex ancestral traditions practiced throughout the Andes. Without written accounts describing how these buildings were used, each interpretation remains carefully considered but incomplete. Excavations have revealed evidence of long-distance trade. Fragments of exotic materials indicate connections with distant regions, while ceramics display influences from neighboring cultures. Marcahuamachuco occupied an important position along routes linking the northern Andes with communities farther south, allowing goods, ideas, and technologies to circulate across considerable distances. This raises another question. How influential was this city during its height? Some researchers argue Marcahuamachuco functioned as the capital of a powerful regional kingdom capable of controlling trade and surrounding territories. Others suggest a looser political structure in which local communities gathered here for religious ceremonies, seasonal markets, or administrative activities while maintaining considerable independence. The archaeological evidence supports aspects of both possibilities. Yet, no single explanation fully captures the complexity visible across the site. One particularly fascinating aspect involves the remarkable quality of its stone construction. Walls built without mortar have endured centuries of earthquakes, erosion, and changing weather conditions. Builders carefully selected locally available stone, shaping it into stable structures that continue standing despite the harsh mountain environment. Their engineering reflects generations of accumulated knowledge. Yet, many construction techniques remain only partially understood. How was labor organized? Who planned such extensive architecture? Did specialized architects oversee construction, or did communities contribute collectively over generations? The answers remain hidden within the stones themselves. The city's decline presents another enduring mystery. By approximately AD 1000, Marcahuamachuco had begun losing much of its former importance. Later, the expanding Inca Empire incorporated the region into its growing territory, adapting portions of the site while constructing new administrative centers elsewhere. Why did such an impressive settlement gradually lose prominence? Environmental pressures may have contributed. Changing political alliances could have shifted regional influence. Trade routes may have evolved, redirecting commerce toward emerging centers. Rather than a sudden collapse, archaeological evidence suggests a gradual transformation unfolding over several centuries. Even so, important details remain uncertain. Religious life within Marcahuamachuco also continues to invite careful investigation. Several structures appear aligned with ceremonial activity rather than ordinary domestic use. Large, open plazas could have accommodated gatherings involving significant portions of the population. Some compounds contain evidence suggesting ritual practices associated with ancestor veneration, offerings, or seasonal observances. The surrounding mountains likely formed an integral part of these traditions. Throughout Andean belief systems, landscapes themselves often possessed sacred qualities. Peaks, springs, caves, and unusual rock formations were understood not merely as natural features, but as places connected to powerful spiritual forces. Standing atop the plateau today, with sweeping views extending across distant valleys, it is not difficult to imagine why ancient communities may have regarded this place as exceptional. One of Marcahuamachuco's greatest puzzles involves the absence of extensive historical documentation. Unlike civilizations that left inscriptions or monumental texts, knowledge of its rulers, political events, and social organization must be reconstructed almost entirely through archaeology. Who governed this remarkable city? Did leadership pass through hereditary dynasties? Were religious authorities equally influential? How were disputes resolved? What languages echoed through these stone corridors more than 1,000 years ago? Every excavation uncovers additional artifacts, yet the broader narrative remains incomplete. Local traditions have long contributed another dimension to the mystery. Stories passed through generations describe hidden passages beneath the plateau, concealed chambers within the massive walls, and treasures protected by ancestral spirits. Some legends speak of sacred objects hidden before later conquerors arrived. Others tell of guardians who continue watching over the ancient city long after its inhabitants departed. Archaeologists approach such traditions with thoughtful caution. Most underground chambers identified so far relate to construction techniques, storage spaces, or burial contexts rather than elaborate secret networks. Even so, oral traditions often preserve fragments of historical memory in symbolic form. Separating metaphor from historical reality is rarely straightforward. The surrounding landscape continues offering surprises. Modern archaeological surveys have revealed additional settlements, agricultural terraces, and road systems connected to Marcahuamachuco, suggesting that the plateau served as the center of a much larger regional network. Rather than existing in isolation, it interacted continuously with surrounding communities through exchange, agriculture, ceremony, and political relationships. As remote sensing technologies improve, researchers continue identifying features previously concealed by vegetation or difficult terrain. Each discovery expands the boundaries of the ancient city. Independent researchers occasionally advance more speculative ideas. Some propose that Marcahuamachuco represented the surviving center of an otherwise unknown Andean civilization, whose influence extended far beyond currently recognized archaeological evidence. Others suggest its monumental compounds functioned as astronomical observatories or encoded symbolic knowledge within their layouts. A few imagine hidden sectors of the plateau remain unexplored, preserving untouched ceremonial complexes beneath collapsed stone and accumulated soil. At present, none of these ideas has received convincing archaeological confirmation. Nevertheless, the site remains only partially excavated. Large portions continue awaiting systematic investigation, leaving open the possibility that future discoveries could significantly reshape current understanding. Recent advances in archaeological science have already transformed interpretations once considered settled. Radiocarbon dating, environmental reconstruction, microscopic residue analysis, and drone-based mapping continue revealing details invisible to earlier generations of researchers. Questions that once seemed impossible to approach now receive increasingly sophisticated investigation. Yet every answer appears accompanied by new uncertainty. Perhaps that is the defining quality of Marcahuamachuco. Its immense walls stand openly beneath the Andean sky, visible to anyone willing to climb the plateau, yet the lives of the people who built them remain remarkably elusive. There is no dramatic disappearance recorded in ancient texts, no legendary final battle preserved in reliable historical accounts. Instead, there is a quieter mystery. A flourishing city emerged, prospered, shaped the surrounding region, gradually changed, and eventually yielded its place within history, while leaving behind architecture of astonishing ambition. Today, the wind continues moving through empty corridors just as it did centuries ago. Birds circle above weathered towers whose original names have long been forgotten. The stone walls still command sweeping views across valleys that once carried merchants, pilgrims, farmers, and travelers toward the plateau. Every carefully placed block reflects decisions made by builders whose identities remain unknown, while every newly uncovered artifact adds another fragment to an unfinished story. Marcahuamachuco reminds us that history is not always hidden beneath forests or buried beneath the earth. Sometimes it stands in plain sight, patiently waiting for the right questions to reveal meanings that have remained silent for more than 1,000 years. From the silent stone corridors of Marcahuamachuco, our journey returns to the vast Pacific, where another sacred place waits at the edge of the world. Here, towering mountains give way to volcanic cliffs overlooking an endless ocean, and the mystery shifts from forgotten kingdoms to rituals performed on one of the planet's most isolated inhabited islands. If Vinapu introduced us to the remarkable craftsmanship of Rapa Nui, Orongo reveals an entirely different chapter of its history, one centered not on colossal statues alone, but on ceremony, competition, and beliefs that continue to intrigue researchers. Perched on the rim of the Rano Kau volcano, Orongo Ceremonial Village occupies one of the most breathtaking locations anywhere in the Pacific. To one side lies the vast crater of an extinct volcano, its floor filled with freshwater marshes and dense vegetation. On the opposite side, sheer cliffs plunge nearly 300 meters into the crashing waves below. Far beyond the shoreline, 3 small rocky islets, Motu Nui, Motu Iti, and Motu Kau Kau, rise from the ocean like dark sentinels, separated from the island by turbulent currents and powerful swells. The setting feels deliberately chosen. Strong winds sweep continuously across the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and volcanic stone. Seabirds circle overhead, while waves explode against the rocks far beneath the village. Standing at Orongo, it becomes easy to understand why ancient inhabitants regarded this place as one of profound spiritual importance. Unlike the towering moai statues that have become synonymous with Rapa Nui, Orongo consists of dozens of low stone houses, carefully constructed from thin slabs of volcanic rock. Their curved walls blend almost seamlessly into the surrounding landscape. Many of the structures are partially embedded into the ground, with small entrances requiring visitors to crouch before entering. From above, the village appears almost hidden within the volcanic ridge itself. Archaeologists believe Orongo reached its greatest importance during the late prehistoric period of Rapa Nui, particularly between the 17th and 19th centuries. By this time, the island had undergone significant social and religious transformation. Earlier generations had focused much of their ceremonial life around the construction and veneration of the great moai statues erected upon massive stone platforms. Gradually, however, another religious tradition emerged. Its central figure was Makemake, a creator deity associated with fertility, birds, and renewal. At the heart of this evolving belief system stood one of the most remarkable ceremonies known anywhere in Polynesia, the Birdman competition. Each year, representatives chosen by powerful clans gathered at Orongo to participate in an event combining physical endurance, ritual symbolism, political authority, and spiritual devotion. The challenge began with a dangerous descent down the volcanic cliffs. Competitors, or their appointed servants, climbed toward the ocean below before swimming through unpredictable currents to Motu Nui, the largest of the offshore islets. There they waited. Their objective was deceptively simple. The first person to obtain the season's initial egg laid by the sooty tern, known locally as the Manutara, would carefully transport it back across the ocean and climb the cliffs without breaking it. Success brought extraordinary consequences. The victorious competitor's sponsoring leader received the title of Tangatamanu, the Birdman. For the following year, this individual gained immense prestige, ceremonial authority, and important political influence within island society. The ritual, therefore, represented far more than athletic competition. It determined leadership through a sacred process believed to reflect divine favor. The dramatic setting amplified every aspect of the ceremony. The steep cliffs transformed the descent into a perilous undertaking. Powerful waves made the swim unpredictable. Sharp, volcanic rocks threatened injury at every stage. The challenge demanded not only physical ability, but courage, patience, and unwavering commitment. Even today, observing the distance between Orongo and the offshore islets raises an obvious question. How many participants completed the journey successfully? Historical accounts suggest the competition continued for generations, yet precise details remain surprisingly limited. European visitors documented aspects of the ceremony during the 18th and 19th centuries, recording traditions still remembered by island communities. By then, however, cultural changes resulting from outside contact had already begun transforming life on Rapa Nui. Researchers therefore face the difficult task of reconstructing earlier practices from fragmentary observations, oral traditions, archaeology, and later ethnographic accounts. The village itself preserves important clues. Numerous petroglyphs carved into surrounding rocks depict bird-human figures with elongated beaks, curved bodies, and symbolic designs unlike any found elsewhere on the island. These images almost certainly relate to the Birdman tradition, yet many of their precise meanings remain uncertain. Were they portraits of individual winners? Representations of make-make? Symbols recording important ceremonies? Or visual expressions of ideas that cannot easily be translated into modern language? The carvings continue resisting simple interpretation. Make-make also appears frequently within Orongo's artistic traditions. Faces with large, rounded eyes and stylized features emerge from volcanic stone, watching silently over the ceremonial village. Although scholars generally agree these figures represent the deity, questions remain concerning the broader belief system surrounding them. How were rituals performed? What prayers accompanied the annual competition? Which ceremonies unfolded inside the stone houses overlooking the sea? The archaeological evidence provides valuable hints, but not complete answers. Another fascinating mystery concerns the transition from the Moai-centered religion to the Birdman cult. For many years, researchers proposed that environmental decline and social conflict led to the abandonment of statue construction, creating conditions in which new religious traditions replaced older ones. This interpretation became widely accepted throughout much of the 20th century. More recent research has introduced greater nuance. Rather than viewing the shift as evidence of sudden collapse, many archaeologists now suggest a gradual evolution in religious practice. Communities adapted to changing circumstances while maintaining continuity with earlier traditions. The Birdman ceremonies may therefore represent transformation rather than replacement. Elements of older beliefs could have survived within new ceremonial frameworks. If so, Orongo becomes not merely the site of a new religion, but a bridge connecting different phases of Rapa Nui's spiritual history. The surrounding landscape contributes another layer of intrigue. The Ranokau crater itself provided an important freshwater source and supported unique vegetation within its sheltered interior. From Orongo's cliffs, participants could observe both the crater and the open Pacific simultaneously. Some researchers suggest this location symbolized the meeting of different worlds, land and sea, life and death, ancestors and the living. Although such interpretations remain speculative, the extraordinary geography almost certainly influenced ceremonial meaning. Why else choose such a dramatic location for the island's most important annual ritual? Excavations have recovered obsidian tools, fishhooks, ceremonial objects, and evidence of repeated occupation spanning several centuries. The stone houses themselves reveal careful craftsmanship despite their modest appearance. Their low profiles protected occupants from relentless winds while blending harmoniously into the volcanic terrain. Many appear designed for temporary ceremonial use rather than permanent residence. This suggests Orongo functioned primarily as a sacred gathering place rather than an ordinary village. The annual arrival of pilgrims, priests, leaders, and competitors may have transformed the quiet settlement into the spiritual center of the island for brief but intensely significant periods. Local traditions have long enriched the mystery surrounding Orongo. Stories speak of powerful priests capable of communicating with spiritual forces. Some accounts describe sacred knowledge passed only through select lineages. Others tell of ceremonies conducted under strict secrecy, witnessed only by initiated participants. Because much traditional knowledge was disrupted following European contact, disease, slave raids, missionary activity, and social upheaval. During the 19th century, portions of these traditions may have been permanently lost. This historical disruption leaves modern researchers confronting unavoidable gaps. How much of Orongo's ceremonial life disappeared before systematic documentation began? What songs once echoed across the cliffs during the Birdman Festival? What myths explained the dangerous journey to Motu Nui? The answers may never be fully recovered. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed more unconventional interpretations. Some suggest the Birdman competition encoded astronomical observations linked to seasonal cycles. Others believe the arrangement of petroglyphs reflects symbolic maps or navigational knowledge inherited from earlier Polynesian voyagers. A few speculate that hidden chambers or undiscovered ceremonial spaces remain concealed beneath volcanic deposits surrounding the village. To date, archaeological evidence has not confirmed these ideas, yet Orongo continues producing new discoveries as excavation methods improve and researchers revisit earlier interpretations with modern technology. Even details once considered well understood sometimes reveal unexpected complexity. The relationship between Orongo and other ceremonial centers across Rapa Nui remains another active area of study. How closely were rituals coordinated with communities elsewhere on the island? Did every clan participate equally? How were winners remembered after each competition? Were certain stone houses reserved for specific families or priestly groups? Each question opens another avenue of investigation. Standing at Orongo today, the power of the location speaks more loudly than any surviving artifact. Endless waves continue breaking against the cliffs below. Seabirds still circle above Motu Nui just as they did centuries ago, returning each nesting season according to rhythms older than memory itself. The low stone houses remain firmly anchored to the volcanic ridge, their narrow entrances opening toward a landscape where earth, sky, and ocean seem to converge. It is easy to imagine silent observers waiting for the first glimpse of a returning swimmer carrying the precious egg that would shape the island's future for another year. Whether every symbol has been correctly interpreted, or whether deeper layers of meaning remain hidden within Orongo's weathered stones, is a question that still lingers. In a place where ritual, landscape, and belief became inseparable, perhaps the greatest mysteries are not those carved into rock, but those carried away long ago by the wind rising from the Pacific below. As the winds of Orongo fade into the distance, our path leads away from the isolated Pacific and into the heart of West Africa. Here, the mystery is shaped not by volcanic cliffs or ocean rituals, but by towering stone walls standing quietly within a landscape of forests and rolling savannas. For centuries, these ruins remained largely unknown outside the surrounding communities, protected not by remote mountains but by time itself. Like so many places in this journey, Loropéni asks a familiar question. How can such an impressive achievement leave behind so few clear answers? In the southwestern corner of modern Burkina Faso, near the borders of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, dense vegetation gradually parts to reveal a remarkable sight. Massive stone walls emerge from the earth, rising unexpectedly above the surrounding trees. Their weathered surfaces carry the marks of centuries of rain, wind, and tropical heat. Yet much of the structure remains standing with extraordinary resilience. This is the Loropéni Ruins. Unlike many ancient cities dominated by temples or towering monuments, Loropéni possesses a different kind of presence. The walls themselves command attention. Stretching for hundreds of meters and reaching heights of more than 6 meters in some sections, they surround an enclosed area whose original purpose continues to inspire careful debate. Constructed without mortar, the stones have been patiently stacked with remarkable skill, creating fortifications that have survived generations of political change and environmental transformation. Walking alongside these walls, one immediately notices their quiet confidence. There is no elaborate decoration. No monumental inscriptions celebrate victorious rulers. No carved reliefs explain the lives of those who built them. Instead, the architecture speaks through scale, craftsmanship, and endurance. Archaeologists generally believe Loropéni flourished between approximately the 11th and 17th centuries, although some evidence suggests portions of the site may be even older. The ruins belong to a wider network of fortified stone settlements scattered across this part of West Africa, often associated with communities collectively linked to the Lobi cultural region and earlier populations that occupied these lands before later migrations reshaped the area. Yet identifying the precise builders remains surprisingly difficult. Unlike civilizations that left abundant written records, the people connected with Loropéni transmitted much of their history through oral traditions. These traditions preserve valuable memories, but like all oral histories, they evolved across generations, blending historical events with symbolic narratives and local legend. As a result, archaeologists must reconstruct the site's past using fragments of evidence gathered from excavation, architecture, environmental analysis, and comparisons with neighboring settlements. One of the strongest theories connects Loropéni with the region's historic gold trade. For centuries, West Africa supplied enormous quantities of gold to commercial networks stretching across the Sahara and beyond. Merchants transported precious metals northward through carefully organized trade routes linking forest kingdoms with distant markets. Historical records describe the extraordinary wealth generated by these exchanges. Gold from West Africa reached North Africa, the Mediterranean world, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, fueling economies and shaping powerful states. Loropéni occupied a strategic position near important gold-producing regions. Many archaeologists therefore believe the fortified enclosure may have protected valuable resources, merchants, or administrative activities associated with this extensive commercial network. If this interpretation is correct, The walls represent far more than military defenses. They symbolize participation in one of the medieval world's most significant systems of long-distance trade. Yet important questions remain unanswered. What exactly occurred inside the enclosure? Was it a permanent settlement, a royal residence, a commercial depot, a ceremonial center, or perhaps several of these functions at different moments in its history? Excavations have recovered pottery fragments, iron objects, and evidence of domestic occupation, suggesting that people lived within the walls. However, the archaeological record remains incomplete. Much of the enclosed area has yet to undergo extensive excavation. The possibility that important structures remain buried beneath accumulated soil continues to attract scholarly interest. The walls themselves deserve careful attention. Their builders selected local stone and assembled it with impressive precision despite the absence of mortar. The construction required careful planning, skilled labor, and sustained coordination. How was such a project organized? Did specialized builders oversee construction? Were local communities responsible through collective effort? Or did powerful leaders command the workforce needed to complete these imposing defenses? Without written documentation, certainty remains elusive. One particularly intriguing aspect involves the design of the enclosure. Rather than forming a perfect geometric shape, the walls follow the natural contours of the landscape, adapting to subtle changes in elevation while maintaining impressive structural integrity. This suggests intimate knowledge of both engineering and local geography. Builders understood how to work with the land rather than forcing the landscape into rigid patterns. The result feels almost organic, as though the walls grew naturally from the surrounding stone. The broader historical context deepens the mystery. Between the 11th and 16th centuries, West Africa witnessed the rise and transformation of several influential states and commercial networks. Great kingdoms expanded through diplomacy, trade, and military power. Caravan routes connected distant regions across thousands of kilometers. Gold, salt, textiles, copper, ivory, and other valuable goods circulated between communities separated by vast deserts and dense forests. Where exactly did Loropéni fit within this changing world? Was it controlled by a larger kingdom? Did it function independently? Did alliances shift over generations as political landscapes evolved? Archaeology offers valuable clues but few definitive answers. Unlike famous capitals celebrated in written chronicles, Loropéni occupies a quieter position within history. Its importance must be inferred rather than directly described. Another enduring puzzle concerns the apparent longevity of the site. Evidence indicates repeated phases of occupation and modification spanning several centuries. Walls were repaired, structures changed, communities adapted. Rather than representing a single moment frozen in time, Loropéni appears to have evolved alongside the societies that inhabited it. Understanding these changes remains one of archaeology's ongoing challenges. Environmental studies also contribute important insights. The surrounding landscape has transformed considerably over the centuries. Forests expanded and retreated. Agricultural practices changed. Climate fluctuations influenced settlement patterns and resource availability. How did these environmental shifts affect life within the enclosure? Did periods of drought encourage stronger fortifications? Did prosperous harvests support population growth? Or did changing trade routes ultimately reduce the site's strategic value? The answers remain only partially understood. The absence of monumental temples or palaces has encouraged multiple interpretations. Some archaeologists argue that authority may have been expressed differently here than in many better-known ancient civilizations. Political leadership need not always produce grand royal architecture. Influence could instead have rested upon control of trade, kinship networks, religious authority, or access to valuable resources. This perspective challenges assumptions shaped by civilizations where kings announced their power through massive monuments. Loropéni reminds researchers that complexity can leave quieter archaeological signatures. Local traditions surrounding the ruins add another dimension. For generations, nearby communities regarded the site with respect and caution. Certain areas were considered spiritually significant. Stories spoke of ancestors whose presence continued within the ancient walls. Some traditions discouraged unnecessary disturbance, contributing to the preservation of the ruins long before formal archaeological protection began. Other accounts describe hidden chambers, forgotten entrances, or valuable objects concealed during periods of conflict. As with many oral traditions, separating symbolic meaning from historical memory is rarely straightforward. Yet such stories often preserve echoes of genuine events filtered through centuries of retelling. Could memories of ancient defensive strategies survive within these narratives? Might references to hidden places reflect architectural features that have yet to be excavated? The possibility cannot be dismissed outright. Scientific investigation continues uncovering new information. Careful excavation has revealed domestic structures, ironworking evidence, ceramics, and imported materials that indicate participation in broader regional exchange. These discoveries reinforce the view that Loropéni was neither isolated nor culturally stagnant. Instead, it belonged to an active landscape shaped by commerce, migration, technological innovation, and social adaptation. Modern survey techniques continue expanding knowledge of the surrounding region. Additional archaeological sites have been documented beyond the main enclosure, suggesting Loropéni formed part of a larger settlement system rather than standing alone. Roads, agricultural zones, and smaller communities may once have supported the fortified center. Understanding these relationships remains an important area of ongoing research. Independent researchers occasionally explore more speculative possibilities. Some have proposed that Loropéni formed part of an immense defensive network extending across much of West Africa, linking multiple stone enclosures through coordinated communication systems. Others imagine forgotten royal dynasties, whose names disappeared entirely after political upheaval reshaped the region. A few suggest that significant underground chambers remain concealed beneath the enclosure, preserving untouched artifacts capable of transforming current understanding. At present, archaeological evidence neither confirms nor entirely eliminates such possibilities. Large portions of the site remain only partially investigated. Future excavations may reveal structures impossible to anticipate today. Another fascinating question involves the builder's remarkable knowledge of stone construction. Dry stone architecture requires careful balancing of weight, pressure, and stability. Every stone contributes to the strength of those surrounding it. The survival of Loropéni's walls through centuries of tropical weather demonstrates exceptional engineering skill. Where was this expertise learned? Did master builders pass techniques through generations? Were similar traditions shared across neighboring communities? Or does Loropéni represent one surviving example of a broader architectural heritage that has largely disappeared? Comparisons with other fortified sites throughout the region continue helping researchers investigate these questions. Still, every comparison highlights both similarities and unique local characteristics. No two sites tell precisely the same story. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what Loropéni contains, but how much history surrounding it has simply faded from memory. Entire generations lived, traded, governed, celebrated, mourned, and defended these walls. Children grew into elders. Merchants arrived carrying goods from distant lands. Craftsmen shaped iron tools and pottery. Leaders made decisions influencing lives far beyond the enclosure. Yet almost every personal name connected to these events has been lost. History preserves the stones while allowing the voices to disappear. Today, sunlight moves slowly across weathered walls that have witnessed nearly 1,000 years of changing seasons. Trees cast shifting shadows over pathways once filled with daily activity. Birds nest within cracks between stones placed by hands whose identities remain unknown. The silence surrounding Loropéni is not empty. It is layered with countless untold stories waiting beneath the soil. Every excavation reveals another fragment. Every survey redraws another piece of the ancient landscape. And every unanswered question reminds us that some of West Africa's greatest historical achievements are only beginning to emerge into clearer focus. Perhaps somewhere beneath the remaining unexcavated ground, or within oral traditions that have yet to be fully understood, the next chapter of Loropéni's remarkable story is still patiently waiting to be discovered. From the enduring stone walls of Loropéni, our journey crosses the Atlantic once more, returning to the dry landscapes of South America. The scenery changes dramatically. Dense forests give way to broad desert plains, where almost no rain falls, and the silence seems to stretch for miles. Here, beneath layers of sand shaped by centuries of wind, lies another remarkable place whose purpose continues to inspire debate. Unlike a fortified city or a royal capital, Cahuachi appears to have been built for something far less tangible, a place where ceremony, belief, and mystery became inseparable. In the Nazca Valley of southern Peru, the desert unfolds in every direction beneath an immense blue sky. Low hills rise gently from the pale earth, their slopes marked by centuries of erosion. At first, the landscape seems almost empty, revealing little more than sand, scattered stones, and dry riverbeds that carry water only during rare seasonal floods. Then, gradually, unusual shapes begin to emerge. Broad, artificial platforms rise from the plain. Stepped pyramids interrupt the horizon. Long walls define open plazas. Mounds stretch across the valley floor in carefully organized patterns. Together, they form Cahuachi, one of the largest ceremonial complexes ever constructed in the ancient Andes. Unlike many archaeological sites that developed into thriving urban centers, Cahuachi presents a striking paradox. Its monumental architecture suggests enormous effort and considerable organization. Yet, evidence for permanent residential occupation remains surprisingly limited. This raises one of the site's oldest questions. If relatively few people lived here year-round, why construct such an immense ceremonial landscape? Archaeologists generally associate Cahuachi with the Nazca culture, which flourished between approximately AD 1 and AD 500. During this period, communities spread across the arid valleys of southern Peru developed sophisticated irrigation systems, vibrant artistic traditions, and elaborate religious practices. The Nazca are perhaps best known today for the enormous geoglyphs etched into the surrounding desert. Vast figures depicting animals, plants, geometric designs, and straight lines stretching across the landscape. Although Cahuachi and the Nazca lines are distinct archaeological sites, they appear deeply connected within the broader cultural and ceremonial life of the region. Many researchers believe pilgrims may have traveled across the desert toward Cahuachi, passing near or along portions of the geoglyphs during important religious gatherings. The possibility transforms the surrounding landscape into something much larger than isolated monuments. Instead of separate locations, the desert itself may have functioned as a carefully organized ceremonial environment. Excavations reveal that Cahuachi covered more than 20 square kilometers at its greatest extent. Dozens of adobe pyramids, plazas, courtyards, terraces, and ceremonial platforms rose above the desert floor. Unlike stone-built cities high in the Andes, these structures were constructed primarily from adobe, sun-dried mud bricks carefully shaped and stacked into monumental forms. The choice of material reflected local environmental conditions. Although adobe might appear fragile, the region's extremely dry climate preserved many structures for centuries. One of the site's largest constructions, often referred to as the Great Pyramid, dominates the surrounding landscape. Rising approximately 20 meters above the valley floor, it consists of multiple construction phases built one atop another over generations. Each expansion suggests continuing importance rather than a single ambitious building project. The pyramid itself reveals evidence of repeated remodeling. Walls were rebuilt, platforms expanded, ceremonial spaces evolved. These changes indicate that Cahuachi remained a living, sacred center, whose architecture adapted alongside shifting religious traditions. The absence of ordinary domestic life continues to intrigue archaeologists. Only limited evidence exists for extensive residential neighborhoods comparable to those found in ancient cities. Instead, researchers increasingly interpret Cahuachi as a pilgrimage center, visited periodically by communities scattered throughout the Nazca region. People may have gathered here for seasonal festivals, religious ceremonies, trade, political meetings, or rituals connected to agriculture and water. After these events concluded, many participants likely returned to their home settlements. If this interpretation is correct, Cahuachi functioned less as a city and more as a ceremonial heart, whose influence extended across the surrounding valleys. The architecture reinforces this possibility. Large plazas could accommodate substantial gatherings. Elevated platforms offered prominent spaces for ritual performances. Restricted areas suggest ceremonies accessible only to selected participants. The movement of people through the complex appears carefully guided by walls, stairways, and open courtyards. Every pathway may have carried symbolic meaning. Religious belief almost certainly shaped every aspect of the site. The Nazca lived within one of the driest environments on Earth, where water determined survival itself. Seasonal rivers descending from the Andes sustained agriculture, while unpredictable climate patterns influenced harvests and daily life. It is therefore unsurprising that many scholars believe ceremonies performed at Cahuachi focused upon fertility, rainfall, mountain spirits, and the forces governing nature. Offerings discovered throughout the site support this interpretation. Excavations have uncovered textiles, ceramics, shell objects transported from distant coastal waters, and carefully arranged ritual deposits. Some offerings appear intentionally buried during construction, perhaps dedicating new buildings to spiritual purposes. Others seem connected to ceremonies repeated over generations. Among the most fascinating discoveries are beautifully preserved textiles. The dry desert environment protected delicate fabrics displaying extraordinary weaving techniques and vibrant colors. These textiles demonstrate remarkable artistic sophistication, while also providing clues regarding clothing, symbolism, and ceremonial identity. Yet, their deeper meanings remain uncertain. What messages did their designs communicate? Were certain garments reserved for priests? Did colors carry religious significance now impossible to reconstruct? Another layer of mystery surrounds human remains recovered from portions of the complex. Some burials appear formal and carefully prepared. Others suggest ritual activity involving isolated skulls or selected body parts. The Nazca practiced complex funerary traditions, and archaeologists continue debating how these discoveries relate to broader ceremonial life. The famous Nazca trophy heads provide another intriguing dimension. These carefully prepared human heads, often modified with cords for carrying, have long attracted attention. Earlier interpretations viewed them primarily as trophies taken during warfare. More recent research presents a more nuanced picture. Some may indeed have originated through conflict. Others appear connected to ancestor veneration, ritual performance, agricultural ceremonies, or symbolic expressions of renewal. At Cahuachi, such discoveries encourage questions rather than certainty. Did participants carry trophy heads during ceremonies? Were they offerings to supernatural forces? Did they represent revered ancestors whose presence continued within sacred rituals? The archaeological evidence supports several possibilities without conclusively resolving the debate. The relationship between Cahuachi and the Nazca lines remains one of the region's greatest mysteries. Stretching across nearby desert plains, the geoglyphs include hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, whales, geometric figures, and perfectly straight lines extending for kilometers. Because many lines converge toward the Nazca Valley, researchers have long explored possible ceremonial connections. Some scholars propose that pilgrims walked specific routes marked by the lines before arriving at Cahuachi. Others suggest the geoglyphs served as ritual landscapes visible primarily to the surrounding mountains and sky rather than to human observers. Astronomical interpretations have also been proposed, although most specialists now caution against attributing all lines to celestial alignments. Instead, the Nazca lines likely fulfilled multiple purposes across different periods. Within this broader ceremonial landscape, Cahuachi may have functioned as the destination toward which many sacred journeys ultimately led. Environmental change appears to have played an important role in the site's history. Around the middle of the first millennium A.D., powerful floods associated with recurring climatic events likely damaged portions of the ceremonial center. Evidence suggests heavy rainfall eroded adobe structures while altering surrounding river systems. Soon afterward, major construction largely ceased. Rather than collapsing through warfare or conquest, Cahuachi may have experienced gradual abandonment as environmental conditions and religious traditions evolved. Remarkably, many structures were intentionally covered with layers of clean soil before abandonment. This careful burial fascinates archaeologists. Why conceal monumental buildings rather than simply leaving them exposed? One explanation suggests ceremonial closure. Just as sacred objects may be respectfully retired rather than discarded, the buildings themselves could have undergone formal rituals marking the end of their active use. If so, the final act performed at Cahuachi was not destruction, but preservation. The desert faithfully protected what its builders intentionally entrusted to the earth. Local traditions have added further layers of intrigue. Stories describe hidden chambers buried beneath the pyramids. Some speak of underground passages linking major structures. Others mention sacred objects still resting beneath untouched platforms. Although archaeological investigations have identified construction fill, storage areas, and interior spaces within certain buildings, no evidence has confirmed extensive underground labyrinths. Still, only a portion of the enormous complex has undergone detailed excavation. Much remains concealed beneath centuries of accumulated sand. Modern technologies continue transforming understanding of the site. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial photography, drone surveys, and high-resolution mapping reveal subtle architectural features previously overlooked. Each new survey expands the known boundaries of the ceremonial complex. Previously unidentified plazas, walls, and construction phases continue emerging from beneath the desert surface. Far from being fully understood, Cahuachi appears increasingly complex with every passing decade. Independent researchers occasionally venture beyond mainstream interpretations. Some suggest the site served as an ancient center for astronomical observation, its pyramids carefully positioned according to celestial events. Others imagine that the Nazca lines formed an immense ceremonial map leading initiates toward increasingly sacred spaces within Cahuachi. A few propose that the builders possessed symbolic knowledge encoded within the landscape itself, connecting architecture, mountains, rivers, and desert geoglyphs into one unified spiritual system. While none of these broader theories has been conclusively demonstrated, they reflect an undeniable reality. Cahuachi continues resisting simple explanation. Even specialists who have devoted decades to its study acknowledge that many aspects of its religious life remain beyond complete reconstruction. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not hidden beneath a pyramid or buried within an undiscovered chamber. Perhaps it exists within the experiences of the thousands who once gathered here. Imagine pilgrims crossing the silent desert beneath the first light of dawn. Ceremonial garments move gently in the wind. Musicians carry instruments whose sounds have long since faded into history. Priests ascend adobe platforms while offerings are placed upon carefully prepared altars. The surrounding mountains watch silently as generations participate in traditions repeated for centuries. Today, only the desert remains to witness those forgotten ceremonies. The pyramids still rise from the earth, softened by time yet unmistakably intentional. The plazas stand empty beneath an immense sky, while shifting sand continues protecting countless artifacts from view. Every excavation uncovers another fragment of a culture whose artistic brilliance is undeniable, yet whose deepest spiritual beliefs remain only partially understood. Cahuachi endures not simply as an archaeological site, but as an invitation to consider how much of humanity's ceremonial past may still lie quietly preserved beneath landscapes that appear, at first glance, completely silent. As the silence of Cahuachi slowly disappears behind us, another sacred landscape begins to emerge high above the clouds. Once again, we leave behind an ancient ceremonial center whose deepest meanings remain only partially understood. This time, however, the mystery rises from the rugged mountains of the Peruvian Andes, where towering cliffs, shifting mists, and carefully carved stone structures combine to create one of the most haunting archaeological sites in South America. Here, nature and architecture appear so closely intertwined that it becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. Far above the valleys of the Apurimac region, at an elevation of more than 4,100 meters, stands Waqrapukara. Reaching the site requires a long journey across windswept grasslands, steep mountain trails, and rocky ridges where the air grows noticeably thinner with every step. The landscape feels isolated even by Andean standards. Massive peaks surround the horizon, clouds drift through deep ravines below, and silence is broken only by the distant calls of birds carried across the mountain winds. Then the rock itself begins to change. A towering sandstone formation rises dramatically from the ridge, its summit divided into two prominent stone projections that resemble the horns of an enormous animal. It is this unusual appearance that gives the site its modern name. In Quechua, Waqra means horn, while Pukara is commonly translated as fortress. Together, the name evokes the image of a horned fortress, although many archaeologists believe the site served purposes far beyond military defense. Standing before Waqrapukara, it is difficult not to feel that the mountain itself was chosen long before the first stone walls were ever built. The cliffs dominate the surrounding valleys, offering sweeping views in every direction. Every pathway leading upward appears deliberate, as though visitors were meant to experience the landscape gradually before reaching the ceremonial heart of the complex. Unlike larger Inca centers such as Machu Picchu or Ollantaytambo, Waqrapukara remained relatively unknown outside local communities for much of modern history. Hidden among remote mountains and requiring considerable effort to reach, it escaped the attention that transformed many famous archaeological sites into major destinations. Its isolation preserved more than its architecture. It preserved an atmosphere. Even today, there are moments when mist rolls across the cliff so completely that the stone structures seem suspended above an endless sea of cloud. Ancient terraces emerge and disappear within shifting fog. Doorways open toward empty skies. Towering rock formations cast long shadows across carefully laid masonry that has survived centuries of mountain weather. The first question many visitors ask seems almost unavoidable. Why build such an important complex in a place so difficult to reach? Archaeologists believe portions of Waqrapukara may have originated before the expansion of the Inca Empire, perhaps under the control of the Kanchi people, who occupied this region before Inca incorporation during the 15th century. Later, the Inca appear to have expanded, modified, or rebuilt significant portions of the site, integrating it into their growing imperial landscape. This layered history complicates interpretation. Some walls display construction techniques characteristic of earlier regional traditions. Others reflect the finely fitted masonry associated with Inca engineering. Rather than representing a single moment in time, Waqrapukara appears to record generations of architectural evolution. Its builders continuously reshaped the mountain while respecting its natural form. The layout itself has encouraged multiple interpretations. Stone terraces descend along steep slopes. Ceremonial plazas occupy carefully leveled spaces. Buildings cluster around open courtyards. Defensive walls guard several approaches, yet many structures appear better suited for gatherings than warfare. For years, the word pukara encouraged the assumption that Waqrapukara functioned primarily as a fortress. Its elevated position certainly provided strategic advantages. Approaching armies would have faced narrow access routes, steep cliffs, and commanding defenders positioned above. Yet, archaeological evidence increasingly suggests a more complex reality. Many specialists now believe Waqrapukara served ceremonial, administrative, and political functions alongside any defensive role it may have possessed. Its location offered visibility not only over surrounding valleys but also within the spiritual geography of the Andes. To understand this possibility, it is important to consider the Andean worldview. Mountains were not merely geological features. They were living entities. Known as apus, prominent peaks were believed to possess powerful spiritual presence capable of influencing weather, agriculture, fertility, and human life. Communities honored these mountain spirits through offerings, ceremonies, and carefully chosen sacred sites. Waqrapukara occupies precisely the kind of dramatic landscape where such beliefs naturally converge. Its horn-shaped summit itself may have carried symbolic meaning now impossible to fully recover. Was the mountain already sacred before architecture appeared? Did builders intentionally enhance a place long associated with spiritual power? Or did the structures themselves transform an ordinary peak into a ceremonial center? The answers remain uncertain. One particularly fascinating feature involves the site's natural rock formations. Rather than leveling the summit entirely, builders incorporated towering stone outcrops into the architectural design. Walls follow irregular cliff edges. Structures embrace existing rock rather than replacing it. This harmony between natural and constructed elements reflects a broader pattern visible throughout Inca architecture, where engineering often sought cooperation with the landscape instead of domination over it. The result creates an impression that the mountain and the buildings belong to the same creation. Excavations have recovered ceramics, tools, and architectural evidence suggesting repeated occupation across different periods. Yet, compared with better-known archaeological centers, Waqrapukara remains relatively understudied. Large portions of the site continue awaiting detailed excavation. Every new investigation expands understanding, while simultaneously revealing additional uncertainties. The surrounding region adds another layer of intrigue. Ancient roads connected Waqrapukara to wider Andean networks, linking remote mountain communities with larger administrative centers. Portions of these pathways still survive, winding across ridges and valleys much as they did centuries ago. Who traveled these roads? Pilgrims, officials, messengers, priests? Perhaps all of them. If Waqrapukara functioned as a ceremonial destination, visitors may have arrived seasonally to participate in rituals connected to agriculture, astronomy, ancestor veneration, or mountain worship. The broad plazas seem capable of accommodating gatherings larger than the site's permanent population alone would require. This observation has strengthened arguments favoring ceremonial importance. Astronomical alignments have also attracted scholarly attention. Certain architectural features appear oriented toward significant points along the horizon where the sun rises or sets during particular times of the year. Such alignments occur at numerous Andean ceremonial centers. Whether every proposed alignment reflects intentional planning remains debated. Still, the possibility that Waqrapukara participated in seasonal observations linked to agricultural cycles remains plausible. For societies dependent upon mountain rainfall and carefully timed planting seasons, celestial observation held practical as well as spiritual significance. The dramatic horn-shaped summit naturally encourages symbolism. Some researchers have suggested the twin rock formations represented duality, an important concept within Andean cosmology, emphasizing complementary forces rather than opposing ones. Others caution that such interpretations remain speculative without direct supporting evidence. Even so, the unusual profile almost certainly influenced how ancient visitors experienced the site. Landscapes often communicate meaning long before words are spoken. Local traditions surrounding Waqrapukara continue adding depth to the mystery. Stories passed through nearby communities describe sacred spirits dwelling among the cliffs. Some legends speak of hidden chambers concealed within the mountain itself. Others tell of priests who performed ceremonies beneath the stars, communicating with powerful forces associated with surrounding peaks. There are accounts of treasures hidden before periods of conflict and of tunnels extending beneath portions of the complex. Modern archaeology has uncovered no convincing evidence supporting extensive underground passageways or concealed treasure vaults. Yet, oral traditions frequently preserve fragments of historical memory, intertwined with symbolism and spiritual belief. Their value often lies less in literal interpretation than in the cultural landscapes they preserve. Independent researchers have occasionally ventured further. Some imagine Waqrapukara as a forgotten astronomical observatory whose architecture encoded sophisticated knowledge of celestial cycles. Others propose that it served as an initiation center reserved for elite members of Andean society. A few even suggest that the site's remarkable isolation reflects deliberate efforts to separate sacred ceremonies from everyday life, creating a mountain sanctuary accessible only to carefully selected participants. None of these possibilities has been conclusively demonstrated. Nevertheless, the limited excavation conducted so far leaves considerable room for future discoveries. Modern technologies are steadily transforming investigation of remote Andean sites. Drone mapping reveals subtle terraces invisible from ground level. High-resolution topographic models expose architectural relationships previously overlooked. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient vegetation and climate conditions. Every advancement provides another opportunity to understand how Waqrapukara functioned within its broader landscape. Yet, each discovery also introduces new questions. Perhaps the most striking quality of Waqrapukara is its atmosphere. Many archaeological sites impress through size alone, others through monumental engineering. Waqrapukara achieves something different. Its power emerges from the relationship between architecture and isolation. Standing upon its terraces, surrounded by towering cliffs and drifting clouds, it becomes easy to understand why ancient communities might have regarded this mountain as a place where the ordinary world gave way to something more profound. The silence itself seems intentional. Even today, long stretches pass without another human voice echoing across the stone walls. Only wind moves between ancient doorways, Only clouds cross the ceremonial plazas. Only distant condors glide effortlessly through the surrounding valleys. In such moments, the boundary between archaeology and imagination grows remarkably thin. One cannot help wondering how many ceremonies unfolded upon these terraces beneath clear Andean skies. How many offerings were placed before sacred stones? How many generations climbed these mountain paths believing they approached a place where the natural and spiritual worlds briefly touched? Today, Waqrapukara remains one of Peru's least understood monumental sites. Its architecture stands quietly against the changing seasons, preserving traces of cultures whose beliefs can only be reconstructed through fragments of stone, pottery, and landscape. Every newly mapped terrace, every carefully excavated structure, and every overlooked pathway suggests that the mountain has not yet revealed its entire story. Perhaps its greatest mystery is not hidden within a forgotten chamber or buried beneath the earth, but within the enduring relationship between the people who built here and the extraordinary peak they chose to transform into something that still inspires awe centuries later. As clouds continue to gather around the horn-shaped summit, the mountain seems content to guard whatever secrets remain, waiting patiently for those willing to listen to the silence as carefully as the stones themselves. As the mountain silence of Waqrapukara gradually fades into the distance, our journey continues deeper into the Andes, where another remarkable place clings to the landscape in a way that seems almost impossible. Once again, the mystery is not hidden underground or concealed beneath dense vegetation. It stands openly against a towering cliff, suspended between earth and sky, quietly overlooking the valleys below. For centuries, travelers have looked up at these weathered structures and wondered the same thing. Why would anyone choose such an unreachable place to honor the dead? High in the cloud forests of northern Peru, where rugged limestone cliffs rise above green valleys and winding rivers, a line of small, house-shaped structures appears almost to grow from the mountainside itself. Seen from a distance, they resemble a tiny village abandoned long ago. Their white walls, faded red markings, and narrow entrances face outward across the landscape, as though their silent occupants continue watching the world below. These are the Revash Mausoleums. Built into a nearly vertical cliff face more than 60 meters above the valley floor, they remain among the most striking funerary monuments in the Andes. Even today, reaching them requires a demanding climb over steep trails and uneven terrain. The final approach offers no easy access, making it immediately clear that their builders deliberately selected a location that combined visibility with protection. The cliff itself seems to have become part of the architecture. The mausoleums occupy natural ledges carved into the rock, while their walls follow the contours of the mountain with remarkable precision. Rather than dominating the landscape, the structures appear carefully woven into it, creating the impression that the cliff accepted them rather than resisted them. Archaeologists generally attribute the Revash Mausoleums to the Chachapoya culture, often known as the people of the clouds. Flourishing between approximately AD 900 and AD 1470, the Chachapoya occupied the mist-covered mountains of northern Peru long before their incorporation into the expanding Inca Empire. Unlike the Inca, whose history survives through extensive archaeological remains and Spanish chronicles, the Chachapoya remain comparatively mysterious. Their settlements, ceremonial centers, cliff tombs, and fortified cities continue emerging from forests and mountain ridges, gradually revealing fragments of a sophisticated society that adapted remarkably well to one of South America's most demanding environments. The Revash Mausoleums offer one of the clearest windows into their beliefs surrounding death. Yet they also raise some of the most difficult questions. The structures themselves are surprisingly distinctive. Instead of caves filled with burials, each mausoleum resembles a miniature building. Rectangular walls support pitched roofs that imitate ordinary houses, although these were never intended for the living. Some preserve traces of white plaster decorated with red geometric designs and symbolic motifs. Small openings appear near the upper sections, while narrow doorways face outward toward the valley. Why construct tombs as houses? Many archaeologists believe this reflects a broader Andean understanding of ancestors as continuing members of the community. Death represented transformation rather than disappearance. Providing the deceased with house-like resting places may have symbolized an enduring connection between generations. The dead were not entirely separated from daily life. Instead, they continued watching over the living from elevated sacred locations. The dramatic placement reinforces this interpretation. The mausoleums overlook fertile valleys where agriculture sustained surrounding communities. From their lofty position, they remain visible across considerable distances while remaining difficult to approach. This combination seems intentional: visibility without accessibility, presence without disturbance, protection without concealment. It was an elegant solution to preserving ancestral remains while maintaining their symbolic importance within the landscape. Excavations conducted inside several mausoleums have revealed human remains accompanied by textiles, pottery, tools, ornaments, and offerings placed beside the deceased. These discoveries indicate that considerable care accompanied each burial. Individuals were wrapped in elaborate funerary bundles before being placed inside the structures, often together with objects reflecting daily life or ceremonial significance. Some mausoleums contained multiple burials accumulated across generations. Others appear to have served smaller family groups. Exactly how access was managed remains uncertain. Did relatives periodically return with new offerings? Were ceremonies performed at the cliff below? Could selected individuals climb directly to the tombs during important occasions? The archaeological evidence offers possibilities but few definitive answers. One particularly fascinating aspect involves the relationship between Revash and the surrounding landscape. Throughout the Andes, elevated places often carried deep spiritual meaning. Mountains were widely regarded as living beings possessing protective and supernatural qualities. Locating ancestors high upon inaccessible cliffs may therefore have represented far more than practical security. The deceased became physically closer to sacred peaks, while simultaneously overlooking the lands associated with their descendants. The mountain itself became part of the funerary ceremony. The Chachapoya demonstrated remarkable engineering skill throughout their territory. They constructed settlements on mountain ridges, agricultural terraces along steep slopes, and ceremonial structures in locations that modern visitors often struggle to reach. Revash reflects this same mastery of difficult terrain. Transporting construction materials to such heights required careful planning, coordinated labor, and intimate knowledge of the landscape. Every stone, every timber, and every plastered wall speaks of determination supported by generations of accumulated experience. Yet no written records explain how these projects were organized. The site's relative isolation has also contributed to its preservation. Unlike more accessible archaeological centers, Revash remained protected by geography itself for centuries. The surrounding cliffs discouraged casual visitors, while the demanding approach limited large-scale disturbance. Even so, time has inevitably left its mark. Earthquakes, weather, erosion, and occasional human interference have damaged portions of the complex. Some mausoleums have partially collapsed. Others preserve only fragments of their original decoration. Yet enough survives to communicate the extraordinary ambition behind the entire project. The painted designs remain another enduring mystery. Simple geometric motifs decorate portions of the surviving walls, while certain structures display stylized figures whose meanings remain uncertain. Do they represent protective symbols, family identities, religious beliefs, architectural decoration, or visual messages intended specifically for the ancestors themselves? Without written explanations, interpretation depends upon careful comparison with other Chachapoya sites. Even then, certainty remains elusive. Nearby archaeological discoveries provide valuable context. Across the Chachapoya region, researchers have documented additional cliff tombs, burial towers known as chulpas, ceremonial sites, and fortified settlements such as Kuelap. Together, these locations suggest a society whose relationship with mountains extended well beyond defense alone. The landscape itself shaped religious belief, social organization, and ancestral remembrance. Revash occupies one chapter within this much broader cultural tradition. Still, it possesses characteristics unlike any other known burial complex. The house-like appearance remains especially distinctive. Perhaps the builders intended the mausoleums to mirror villages inhabited by the living. If so, death did not represent departure from society, but movement into another kind of community overlooking the world below. When the Inca expanded into northern Peru during the 15th century, the Chachapoya eventually became incorporated into the empire, although historical accounts suggest resistance occurred in several regions. Following the arrival of the Spanish during the 16th century, profound cultural transformation followed. Traditional religious practices gradually changed, while many older customs disappeared. As a result, much of the symbolic meaning surrounding Revash likely vanished before systematic historical documentation began. Modern archaeology therefore confronts unavoidable gaps. The architecture survives. The human remains provide biological evidence. Artifacts reveal aspects of material culture. Yet songs, prayers, ceremonies, and spoken explanations have largely been lost. Local traditions continue enriching the mystery. Nearby communities have long regarded the mausoleums with respect. Stories describe ancestral spirits continuing to inhabit the cliffs. Some legends warn against disturbing the tombs, suggesting misfortune may follow those who approach without proper reverence. Others speak of hidden chambers extending deep. Some suggest the placement of the mausoleums reflects astronomical alignments connected with seasonal events. Others propose that the visible arrangement of the tombs formed symbolic patterns recognizable only from distant observation points across the valley. A few speculate that many additional mausoleums remain concealed by vegetation or erosion, representing only a fraction of an originally much larger funerary landscape. Current archaeological evidence neither confirms nor fully dismisses these possibilities. Exploration of the surrounding mountains continues, revealing previously undocumented sites with surprising regularity. Modern technology has begun transforming research throughout the Chachapoya region. Drone photography now reaches cliffs once impossible to survey safely. Three-dimensional scanning preserves fragile architecture in extraordinary detail. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient forests and agricultural systems. Every advancement expands understanding not only of Revash itself, but of the society responsible for creating it. Even so, many questions remain remarkably resistant to final answers. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Revash lies in its quiet permanence. Unlike bustling cities abandoned after political collapse, these structures were never intended for ordinary daily life. They were built for memory, for continuity, for the enduring relationship between generations separated by death but united through place. Every mausoleum represents countless acts of care. Families climbed these difficult slopes, carrying construction materials, offerings, and eventually the carefully prepared remains of loved ones. They selected one of the most inaccessible locations imaginable, not because it was convenient, but because it expressed something profoundly meaningful. Today, the little stone houses continue watching over the valley exactly as they have for centuries. Mist drifts across the cliff face before dissolving beneath the morning sun. Birds nest among weathered walls once decorated with vibrant plaster and painted symbols. The narrow doorways still open toward distant mountains whose peaks disappear into passing clouds. The people resting within these remarkable structures have long since surrendered their names to history, yet the care invested in their final resting places remains unmistakable. Every newly examined artifact reveals another fragment of Chachapoya life, while every unanswered question reminds us that entire beliefs as the silent cliffside tombs of Revash disappear into the Andean clouds, our journey follows an entirely different path, descending from rugged mountain landscapes to the warm coastline of the Yucatan Peninsula. Here, dense tropical vegetation gradually replaces steep cliffs, while the distant sound of waves mixes with the calls of tropical birds. At first glance, this setting seems far removed from the solemn mausoleums we have just explored. Yet, hidden among the trees stands another place where history survives in fragments, inviting us to look beyond its weathered stones toward mysteries that remain surprisingly difficult to explain. Only a short distance from the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, the Rey Archaeological Zone occupies a narrow strip of land between coastal lagoons and the sea. Modern hotels and busy roads surround the area today, making its ancient origins easy to overlook. Yet, once visitors step beyond the entrance, the atmosphere changes almost immediately. The sounds of modern life begin to fade, replaced by rustling palms, circling iguanas, and the quiet presence of limestone structures that have endured for centuries. The site is modest when compared with enormous Maya cities such as Chichen Itza or Calakmul, but its scale should not be mistaken for insignificance. El Rey tells a quieter story. Rather than celebrating imperial power through towering pyramids alone, it reveals the rhythms of a coastal community whose importance grew through trade, ceremony, and adaptation to one of the most valuable maritime corridors in the ancient Maya world. The settlement reached its greatest prosperity between approximately AD 1200 and AD 1550, during the late post-classic period. By then, many of the great inland Maya cities had already experienced significant political transformation or decline. Coastal communities, however, continued flourishing through maritime commerce, connecting settlements scattered across the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. El Rey occupied an ideal position within this network. Nearby lagoons provided sheltered navigation routes. The Caribbean offered access to distant ports. Merchants transported salt, obsidian, jade, textiles, ceramics, seashells, honey, cacao, feathers, and countless other goods between communities separated by hundreds of kilometers. The location alone suggests that El Rey played an important role within these regional exchanges. Yet exactly how influential it became remains uncertain. The site's modern name carries its own mystery. El Rey, meaning the king, does not reflect the ancient Maya name for the settlement. Instead, it originated after archaeologists discovered a carved stone sculpture believed to represent an important individual wearing an elaborate headdress. Early investigators interpreted the figure as a ruler, inspiring the modern designation. The original ancient name has never been securely identified. This absence immediately reminds us of one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Entire communities may leave behind architecture, artwork, and artifacts while losing the very names by which they once knew themselves. Walking through El Rey today, visitors encounter more than 40 surviving structures arranged along a central ceremonial axis. Low pyramids, plazas, residential platforms, temples, and administrative buildings emerge from the surrounding vegetation with understated elegance. Unlike heavily ornamented ceremonial centers, Much of the architecture reflects practical adaptation to local conditions. Limestone blocks form solid foundations. Raised platforms protected important buildings from seasonal flooding. Open plazas created gathering spaces for ceremonies, trade, and community activities. The settlement appears carefully planned without overwhelming the surrounding environment. Excavations have revealed evidence of continuous occupation over several centuries. Ceramics recovered from the site indicate long-term connections with neighboring Maya communities, while imported materials demonstrate participation in wider commercial networks extending throughout Mesoamerica. Trade clearly shaped daily life here, yet commerce alone does not explain the site's ceremonial architecture. Temples and ritual spaces suggest that religious activity remained central to the community's identity. One particularly fascinating aspect involves the relationship between El Rey and the surrounding coastline. Did El Rey serve as a spiritual gateway for maritime travelers? Were offerings made before dangerous voyages began? Did returning merchants participate in rituals of thanksgiving after surviving unpredictable seas? The archaeological record offers intriguing hints, but few definitive conclusions. Numerous burials discovered throughout the site contribute another layer of mystery. Some individuals were interred with carefully selected offerings, including pottery, ornaments, and symbolic objects reflecting social identity or spiritual belief. Others received simpler burials. These differences suggest varying social roles within the community, although reconstructing its precise political organization remains challenging. Unlike larger Maya capitals covered with lengthy hieroglyphic inscriptions celebrating royal dynasties, El Rey preserves relatively few written records. The silence left by missing inscriptions forces archaeologists to rely heavily upon architecture, material culture, and regional comparison. Religious symbolism survives primarily through carved stone, ceremonial layouts, and recovered artifacts. Small shrines, altar-like features, and temple platforms indicate regular ritual activity, yet the specific ceremonies performed here remain largely unknown. Which deities received offerings within these plazas? How did seasonal festivals unfold beneath the tropical sky? Did priests observe astronomical events from elevated platforms overlooking the coast? These questions continue encouraging careful investigation. Astronomy almost certainly influenced aspects of life at El Rey. Throughout the Maya world, celestial observation guided agriculture, ritual calendars, political ceremonies, and architectural planning. Although El Rey lacks the monumental astronomical complexes found elsewhere, certain building orientations appear consistent with broader Maya traditions involving solar movement and seasonal cycles. Researchers continue studying these alignments, seeking to determine whether they reflect practical planning, ceremonial symbolism, or both. Another intriguing question concerns the settlement's relationship with nearby coastal communities. El Rey did not exist in isolation. It formed part of an interconnected landscape containing ports, villages, ceremonial centers, and trade routes extending throughout the peninsula. Communication between these communities likely occurred regularly by both land and sea. Goods circulated, ideas spread, religious traditions evolved, political alliances shifted. Understanding El Rey therefore requires viewing it not as a solitary settlement, but as one participant within a much larger regional network. The arrival of Spanish expeditions during the 16th century dramatically altered this world. Disease, warfare, economic disruption, and colonial expansion transformed long-established coastal societies. Like many Maya settlements, El Rey gradually declined during this period. By the time systematic archaeological investigation began, centuries later, vegetation had reclaimed much of the site. Its buildings rested quietly beneath tropical growth, while generations passed unaware of the community that had once flourished there. Local traditions occasionally preserve stories associated with the ruins. Some accounts describe guardian spirits watching over the ancient structures. Others speak of hidden offerings buried beneath temple platforms or sacred objects concealed before outside powers arrived. There are tales of underground passages connecting important buildings, although archaeological investigations have uncovered no convincing evidence supporting extensive tunnel systems. Still, limestone landscapes naturally contain caves and underground water channels, features that held profound importance throughout Maya belief. The possibility that nearby natural formations contributed to the site's ceremonial significance remains an area of ongoing interest. One unexpected feature immediately captures modern visitors. Large numbers of black, spiny-tailed iguanas now inhabit the archaeological zone, basking peacefully upon ancient walls and temple platforms. While these reptiles became closely associated with the site only in recent times, their constant presence creates an unusual visual connection between the living landscape and ancient architecture. Nature continues adapting the ruins to each new generation. Given the rapid urban growth surrounding the region, this possibility cannot be entirely dismissed. Archaeologists acknowledge that only part of the ancient landscape remains accessible for investigation. Modern technology continues expanding knowledge of the site. Ground surveys, digital mapping, ceramic analysis, and environmental reconstruction reveal increasingly detailed pictures of ancient daily life. Researchers study pollen preserved in surrounding sediments to understand changing vegetation. Chemical analysis traces the origins of traded materials. Every new technique contributes another small piece to the larger historical puzzle. Yet, even with these advances, El Rey retains an unusual quietness. Unlike famous Maya capitals filled with monumental inscriptions proclaiming royal achievements, this settlement asks visitors to notice subtler clues. The spacing between buildings, the direction of pathways, the placement of ceremonial plazas, the evidence of commerce hidden within ordinary household objects. Its story unfolds gradually rather than dramatically. Perhaps that is precisely what makes it so compelling. Not every mystery announces itself through towering pyramids or legendary rulers. Sometimes the greatest historical questions emerge from communities that quietly sustained regional life while leaving only fragments behind. Who governed this coastal settlement? What names did its people give these temples? How many merchants began their journeys here before disappearing beyond the horizon? What ceremonies marked the changing seasons as waves rolled onto nearby shores? The ruins remain patient, offering evidence without complete explanation. Today, sunlight filters through swaying palms onto weathered limestone that has witnessed centuries of changing tides. Iguanas rest upon stairways once climbed by priests, merchants, and families whose identities have largely vanished from history. Tropical vegetation slowly embraces ancient walls without entirely concealing them, creating a landscape where the past and present exist side by side. Every recovered artifact broadens our understanding of this remarkable coastal community, yet every unanswered question reminds us that much of its story still lies beyond our reach. Perhaps somewhere beneath the surrounding forests, hidden beneath layers of earth untouched by excavation, or preserved within details too subtle to recognize today, El Rey continues holding chapters of its history that have waited centuries for the right moment to emerge once again. As the coastal ruins of El Rey gradually disappear behind us, our journey leaves warm tropical shores for an entirely different landscape. Forests and turquoise waters give way to towering cliffs, winding river valleys, and snow-fed mountains where civilizations carved their ambitions directly into solid rock. Here, the mystery is not hidden beneath jungle vegetation or buried beneath centuries of sand. Instead, it rises openly from the face of a mountain, where hundreds of chambers overlook a quiet valley and challenge every first-time visitor with the same astonishing question: how did an entire city come to exist inside a cliff? In southern Georgia, along the rugged valley of the Metkvari River, an immense wall of volcanic rock stretches across the landscape. From a distance, it appears like an ordinary mountainside, shaped by time and weather. Yet, as sunlight moves across the cliff, hundreds of dark openings slowly become visible. Windows, tunnels, balconies, stairways, and chambers emerge one by one, transforming what first seemed like bare stone into one of the world's most remarkable architectural achievements. This is Vardzia. Rather than constructing walls upon the landscape, its builders carved deeply into the mountain itself. The result is a vast network of interconnected spaces extending across multiple levels, forming what appears to be an underground city exposed to daylight. Even today, the sheer scale of the complex inspires quiet amazement. The surrounding valley contributes greatly to the atmosphere. Steep slopes descend toward the river below, while distant mountain ridges frame the horizon. Winds sweep through the cliff openings, carrying echoes along passageways that have remained in use, in one form or another, for centuries. Standing before Vardzia, it becomes difficult to distinguish where nature ends and architecture begins. The mountain itself has become the building. Construction of Vardzia began during the 12th century under the reign of King George III and expanded dramatically during the rule of his daughter, Queen Tamar, one of the most celebrated figures in Georgian history. This period marked a time of remarkable cultural, political, and military strength, often described as Georgia's Golden Age. Yet, Vardzia was never intended to be merely a symbol of royal ambition. It fulfilled several purposes simultaneously. It functioned as a monastery, a refuge, a defensive stronghold, a religious center, perhaps even a temporary city capable of sheltering thousands of people during times of danger. Archaeologists estimate that, at its height, the complex contained hundreds of chambers connected by an intricate system of tunnels, staircases, hidden passages, storage rooms, wine cellars, workshops, living quarters, chapels, and water channels. Some estimates suggest there may once have been more than 600 individual rooms. Others propose even higher numbers before later destruction altered the site. Whatever the precise figure, the scale remains extraordinary. The engineering required careful planning. Rather than excavating randomly, builders organized the chambers into interconnected levels serving different functions. Water systems transported fresh supplies through concealed channels. Food storage areas provided long-term security. Hidden routes allowed movement throughout the mountain while limiting exposure to potential attackers. Every aspect reflects thoughtful design rather than gradual improvisation. One of the most remarkable features remains the Church of the Dormition, carved directly into the living rock near the heart of the complex. Inside, richly colored frescoes continue covering the walls despite centuries of earthquakes, invasions, smoke, moisture, and changing climates. Among these paintings are portraits believed to depict Queen Tamar and King George III, offering rare visual connections to the rulers responsible for Vardzia's expansion. The church transforms the mountain from a defensive structure into a deeply spiritual landscape. Prayer and protection existed side by side. Daily life unfolded beneath painted ceilings, while the surrounding cliff guarded those living within. Yet, Vardzia's appearance today differs dramatically from its original form. In the year 1283, a powerful earthquake struck the region. Rather than destroying the city outright, the earthquake tore away a substantial portion of the mountain's outer face. Entire layers of rock collapsed into the valley below, exposing chambers that had once been concealed deep inside the cliff. Ironically, the disaster revealed the true complexity of the city. Without the earthquake, modern visitors might never have appreciated the extraordinary extent of the excavation hidden within the mountain. This raises an intriguing thought. How different did Vardzia originally appear? Many of the rooms now open to the sky were once enclosed within solid rock. Visitors approaching the mountain centuries ago may have seen only limited entrances, while vast sections remained invisible from outside. The city concealed itself naturally. Its greatest strength lay not in towering walls, but in secrecy. This characteristic has encouraged generations of speculation. Could undiscovered chambers still remain hidden beyond collapsed sections? Might portions of the original tunnel network remain sealed beneath rockfalls? Archaeologists acknowledge that the earthquake permanently altered the site's structure, making complete reconstruction difficult. Some areas became inaccessible, others disappeared entirely. The mountain itself continues preserving unanswered questions. Historical records indicate Vardzia played an important defensive role during periods of regional conflict. Its elevated position overlooked strategic routes through the valley, while concealed passageways offered protection during attack. Still, military defense alone cannot explain the complexity of the site. The extensive monastic facilities reveal a community devoted equally to spiritual life. Monks copied manuscripts, cultivated nearby terraces, produced wine, maintained religious services, and participated in the intellectual traditions of medieval Georgia. The mountain supported both contemplation and survival. Daily life required remarkable organization. Fresh water arrived through sophisticated channels extending from distant springs. Storage chambers preserved grain, wine, and supplies. Ventilation systems allowed air circulation throughout interior spaces. The engineering reflects an intimate understanding of both geology and practical necessity. How did medieval builders coordinate such an ambitious project using only the tools available at the time? Every chamber represents countless hours of labor. Every tunnel required careful planning to avoid collapse. The achievement becomes even more impressive considering the scale of excavation accomplished entirely by hand. Local traditions have long surrounded Vardzia with legend. One popular story attributes the site's name to Queen Tamar herself. According to tradition, while playing within caves during childhood, the young princess became hidden from her companions. When called, she reportedly answered, "Ak Vardzia," often translated as, "I am here, uncle." Whether historically accurate or not, the tale reflects the close association between Vardzia and one of Georgia's most admired historical figures. Other stories speak of secret escape tunnels extending far beyond the visible complex. Some legends describe hidden chambers containing royal treasures concealed during times of invasion. Others tell of sacred relics protected deep within the mountain, where only a few trusted monks knew their location. Modern archaeological investigations have identified concealed passageways and internal corridors designed for movement throughout the complex. However, evidence for extensive hidden treasure vaults or endless underground networks remains unconfirmed. Still, portions of the mountain remain difficult to explore completely. Natural collapses, blocked tunnels, and inaccessible cavities leave room for future discoveries. The surrounding landscape adds further depth to the mystery. High mountain ridges dominate the horizon, while fertile valleys below supported agriculture essential for sustaining the community. From elevated balconies carved into the cliff, inhabitants could observe travelers moving through the river valley long before they reached the settlement. The location balanced isolation with strategic awareness. It offered both sanctuary and surveillance. Religious symbolism may also have influenced the site's placement. Throughout Christian monastic traditions, mountains frequently represented places of spiritual withdrawal, reflection, and closeness to the divine. Carving an entire monastery into a mountainside transformed this symbolism into physical reality. Living within the mountain became an expression of faith as much as architecture. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed more speculative interpretations. Some imagine Vardzia served as part of an enormous defensive network, linking hidden mountain refuges throughout the Caucasus. Others suggest undiscovered chambers remained sealed behind natural rock formations, preserving manuscripts or artifacts untouched for centuries. A few have even wondered whether sections of the visible city represent only a fraction of the original complex before the earthquake reshaped the cliff forever. Current archaeological evidence neither confirms nor completely dismisses these possibilities. Modern technology continues revealing subtle architectural details through laser scanning, digital mapping, and geological analysis. Each investigation improves understanding while highlighting how much remains uncertain. One particularly fascinating aspect involves the psychological experience of the place. Unlike ordinary settlements spread across open ground, Vardzia encourages constant movement through enclosed passageways, narrow staircases, hidden intersections, and unexpected openings overlooking vast landscapes. Light shifts dramatically throughout the day. Some chambers remain illuminated by narrow windows. Others disappear into cool darkness. The mountain creates an environment where orientation constantly changes. It becomes easy to imagine unfamiliar visitors losing their sense of direction within the intricate network. Perhaps this complexity served practical purposes. Perhaps it also carried symbolic meaning. Only the builders truly understood every connection. Centuries after its construction, portions of Vardzia continue serving monastic life. The presence of a small religious community adds another layer to the site's enduring identity. Unlike many archaeological monuments preserved solely as historical remains, Vardzia retains a living spiritual connection spanning generations. Prayer still echoes within spaces first carved during the medieval period. Candles illuminate frescoes painted hundreds of years ago. The mountain remains inhabited, although on a far smaller scale than in its earliest days. Today, visitors standing before the exposed cliff witness only part of the story. Behind every visible chamber lies another question shaped by earthquake, history, and time. The mountain has surrendered enough of its secrets to reveal extraordinary human ingenuity, yet it continues guarding others within inaccessible rock and collapsed passages. Winds move gently through ancient windows where monks once looked across the valley, while fading frescoes continue watching over halls carved by hands long since forgotten. Vardzia reminds us that history is not always written in books or preserved within monuments standing proudly above the earth. Sometimes it is carved into living stone itself, patiently waiting through centuries for each new generation to wonder how much of its hidden world still remains beyond sight. As the carved chambers of Vardzia slowly fade into memory, our path leads away from towering mountains and descends toward the gentle coastline of the Mediterranean. The echoes of monks and hidden passageways give way to rolling waves, warm sea winds, and broad stretches of sand where ships once appeared on the horizon, carrying merchants, travelers, and ideas from distant shores. Yet, beneath this peaceful coastal landscape lies another place whose quiet ruins continue to challenge historians, revealing only fragments of a story that may never be fully reconstructed. On the southern coast of Crete, where the Libyan Sea meets long sandy beaches and low rocky hills, the remains of Kommos rest beneath open skies. Unlike the towering palaces often associated with the Minoan civilization, Kommos possesses a quieter presence. Weathered stone foundations spread gently across the landscape, interrupted by ancient walls, broad courtyards, storerooms, workshops, and mysterious buildings whose original purposes remain subjects of careful debate. At first glance, the site appears almost understated. There are no towering monuments dominating the horizon, no massive pyramids, no soaring temples rising above the coastline. Instead, Kommos reveals itself gradually, rewarding patience rather than spectacle. Every foundation hints at structures that once overlooked one of the busiest maritime corridors in the ancient Mediterranean. Every layer of stone preserves traces of generations whose lives revolved around the sea. Archaeologists believe Kommos flourished primarily during the Bronze Age, particularly between approximately 2000 BC and 1200 BC, when the Minoan civilization reached remarkable levels of artistic achievement, engineering, trade, and maritime influence. During this period, Crete occupied a central position within extensive networks linking Egypt, Cyprus, mainland Greece, Anatolia, and the Near East. Kommos appears to have been one of the island's most important coastal ports. Its location alone explains much of its significance. Situated along a naturally favorable stretch of shoreline, the harbor offered access to shipping routes connecting civilizations separated by hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. Merchant vessels carrying copper, tin, ivory, ceramics, textiles, spices, precious stones, oils, and crafted goods likely entered these waters regularly. The sea that appears calm today once served as one of the world's great highways. Excavations have revealed an unusually complex settlement. Large storage buildings suggest organized commercial activity. Residential areas indicate permanent occupation. Workshops point toward local production. Religious spaces imply ceremonial life integrated closely with economic exchange. Rather than functioning solely as a harbor, Kommos appears to have developed into a thriving community balancing commerce, administration, and ritual. One of the site's most remarkable discoveries involves a series of enormous ship sheds. These elongated stone structures feature wide entrances facing the shoreline, large enough to accommodate substantial vessels pulled onto land for maintenance or protection. If this interpretation is correct, the buildings represent some of the earliest known harbor facilities of their kind in the Mediterranean. Their existence transforms our understanding of Bronze Age maritime organization. Maintaining large trading fleets required planning far beyond simple navigation. Ships demanded repairs. Cargo required storage. Crews needed supplies. Administrators coordinated schedules. Kommos may have served as an essential logistical center supporting this sophisticated maritime economy. Yet, questions remain. Exactly who controlled the harbor? Did local officials manage commercial traffic independently, or did powerful palaces elsewhere on Crete oversee its operations? The archaeological evidence suggests strong connections with nearby Phaistos, one of the major Minoan administrative centers, but the precise relationship remains uncertain. Perhaps Kommos enjoyed considerable autonomy while maintaining political ties inland. Perhaps authority shifted over generations as regional power changed. Trade left unmistakable traces throughout the site. Imported pottery recovered from excavations demonstrates contact with numerous Mediterranean cultures. Egyptian objects appear alongside locally produced ceramics. Materials from Cyprus, mainland Greece, and other distant regions reveal extensive interaction across the sea. Kommos was not isolated. It belonged to an interconnected world where goods, technologies, religious ideas, artistic styles, and cultural traditions moved continually between distant societies. Standing upon the shoreline today, it becomes easy to imagine sails appearing on the horizon one after another, carrying unfamiliar languages and foreign customs into the harbor. Religious life at Kommos presents another fascinating puzzle. Several buildings appear to have served ceremonial purposes, although their exact functions remain debated. Following the decline of the Minoan civilization, later cultures continued using portions of the site, constructing temples and sacred spaces over earlier remains. This continuity suggests that the location itself retained spiritual importance long after political systems changed. One particularly intriguing discovery includes temples associated with later Greek religious traditions, built atop or adjacent to earlier Bronze Age structures. The repeated return to the same location raises important questions. What made this place sacred? Did later communities recognize ancient significance preserved through local memory? Or did practical geography alone explain continued occupation? The answer may involve both. Archaeological layers reveal repeated rebuilding rather than simple abandonment. Each generation modified existing architecture while preserving portions of earlier construction. The result resembles a conversation unfolding across centuries, with each society responding to those that came before. Among the artifacts recovered are beautifully crafted pottery vessels, imported amphorae, bronze tools, seals, figurines, and everyday household objects. Together, they provide valuable insight into commercial life. Yet, many discoveries also deepen the mystery. Certain ceremonial objects appear without obvious explanations. Some imported materials traveled astonishing distances for their time. Others display artistic influences difficult to attribute to a single cultural tradition. Kommos reflects a world where identities blended through constant maritime contact. One enduring question concerns the harbor itself. Coastlines naturally change over thousands of years. Earthquakes, sediment accumulation, rising and falling sea levels, and shifting shorelines gradually transform ancient ports. The waters that served Bronze Age sailors no longer match the modern coastline precisely. Researchers continue reconstructing ancient geography to determine exactly how ships entered and departed the harbor. Some portions of the original port may now lie buried beneath sediment or submerged offshore. Marine archaeology continues investigating these possibilities. The collapse of many Bronze Age civilizations around 1200 BC inevitably affected Kommos as well. Across the eastern Mediterranean, numerous centers experienced destruction, abandonment, or dramatic political transformation. The precise causes remain debated. Climate change, earthquakes, economic disruption, migration, conflict. Perhaps several factors combined simultaneously. Kommos appears to have shared in this broader period of instability. Commercial activity declined. Architectural patterns changed. Yet the site did not vanish entirely. Later, communities returned repeatedly, adapting the landscape to new cultural realities. This resilience distinguishes Kommos from settlements permanently abandoned after catastrophe. Local traditions have added quieter layers to the site's atmosphere. Stories passed through nearby communities occasionally speak of ancient ships resting beneath the sea beyond the shoreline. Others describe hidden chambers still concealed beneath unexcavated portions of the settlement. There are tales of valuable offerings buried beneath temple floors before periods of crisis, protected by generations who never returned. Modern archaeology has uncovered caches of ritual deposits and carefully placed foundation offerings, demonstrating that ceremonial burial practices certainly occurred. However, no evidence has confirmed legendary treasure vaults or vast hidden chambers awaiting discovery. Still, much of Kommos remains unexcavated. Future investigations may yet transform current understanding. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed broader interpretations. Some imagine Kommos serving as an international diplomatic port where representatives from multiple Bronze Age cultures negotiated alliances and exchanged knowledge alongside commercial goods. Others suggest its religious significance extended beyond local communities, attracting pilgrims traveling across the Mediterranean. A few speculate that unexplored offshore structures may represent surviving harbor installations concealed beneath centuries of coastal change. Although these ideas remain speculative, Ongoing marine surveys continue identifying submerged archaeological features throughout the Mediterranean, reminding researchers that ancient coastlines often preserve remarkable surprises. Modern technology has greatly expanded investigation of Kommos. Geophysical surveys identify buried architectural remains without excavation. Satellite imagery assists landscape reconstruction. Sediment analysis reveals ancient environmental conditions. Chemical examination traces the origins of imported materials with increasing precision. Every scientific advance contributes another fragment to the broader historical picture. Yet, perhaps the site's greatest mystery lies not in individual discoveries, but in the countless ordinary moments that archaeology can never fully recover. Imagine the harbor during its height. Ships gently rock against wooden docks as crews unload cargo from distant shores. Craftsmen inspect imported metals while merchants negotiate prices in several languages. Priests prepare offerings before voyages into uncertain seas. Children watch unfamiliar vessels arrive from lands they have never seen. Sailors carry stories of foreign kingdoms whose names have long disappeared from memory. Every sunrise brings new arrivals, while every departure carries pieces of Kommos outward across the Mediterranean. Today, only the wind moves freely across the ancient foundations. Waves continue reaching the same shoreline that welcomed merchants more than 3,000 years ago, while fragments of pottery rest beneath the earth waiting for careful hands to uncover them. The harbor itself has grown quiet, yet its silence speaks of extraordinary connections that once linked distant civilizations through courage, curiosity, and the open sea. Kommos reminds us that history is often written not only in royal palaces or monumental temples, but also in places where cultures met, exchanged ideas, and quietly reshaped one another. Even after decades of excavation, the shoreline still guards unanswered questions, leaving us to wonder how many chapters of this remarkable maritime story remain hidden beneath shifting sands and the calm waters of the Mediterranean. As the quiet shoreline of Kommos gradually slips behind us, our journey remains within the Mediterranean, but the scenery begins to change once again. Busy Bronze Age harbors give way to a smaller island, where history stretches even farther into the past. Here, long before great kingdoms dominated the sea or merchant fleets crossed its waters, another community shaped enormous stones into sacred spaces, whose original purpose continues to inspire careful debate. Their monuments are older than Stonehenge, older than the Egyptian pyramids, and yet their deepest meaning remains remarkably elusive. On the northwestern side of Malta, surrounded today by open countryside and scattered farmland, the remains of the Skorba Temples rest quietly beneath the Mediterranean sun. At first glance, the site appears modest compared with some of the island's larger prehistoric complexes. Low limestone walls trace the outlines of ancient chambers, while weathered stones emerge gently from the earth, as though the landscape itself is slowly remembering what once stood here. Nothing immediately announces the extraordinary age of the place. Its silence almost conceals its importance. Yet, beneath these carefully arranged stones lies evidence of one of Europe's earliest monumental building traditions, constructed thousands of years before many civilizations that are often considered the foundation of recorded history. Archaeologists date the earliest occupation of Skorba to around 5,200 BC, when farming communities first settled the island. The temple structures visible today belong mainly to later phases, particularly between approximately 3,600 BC and 2,500 BC, during Malta's remarkable temple period. This chronology alone raises fascinating questions. Who were these people? How did relatively small island communities organize the labor necessary to construct such impressive monuments? And perhaps most importantly, why devote so much effort to buildings whose exact function remains uncertain after thousands of years? Unlike later societies, the builders of Skorba left no written records explaining their beliefs, ceremonies, or traditions. The stones remain. The voices do not. That absence has transformed Skorba into one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. The temple follows a layout recognizable across several prehistoric Maltese sites. Massive limestone blocks form curved chambers connected by narrow passageways, creating an architectural pattern often described as clover-shaped. Carefully shaped entrances guide movement inward, leading visitors through increasingly enclosed spaces that may have held ceremonial significance. The design appears deliberate rather than practical. These were not ordinary houses. Their thick walls, monumental entrances, and carefully organized interiors suggest places set apart from everyday life. One remarkable feature of Skorba is its importance to archaeology itself. Although the visible remains are relatively modest, excavations uncovered evidence spanning multiple prehistoric periods. Beneath later temple construction, archaeologists discovered traces of even earlier settlements, allowing researchers to establish chronological sequences that transformed understanding of Malta's ancient history. Different layers preserved changing styles of pottery, tools, architecture, and daily life across thousands of years. In many ways, Skorba became a historical timeline carved into the earth. Each generation built upon the remains of those before. The result allows archaeologists to reconstruct cultural development with unusual precision. Even so, chronology answers only part of the mystery. Understanding when something was built differs greatly from understanding why. The temples themselves continue encouraging careful interpretation. Many researchers believe they functioned primarily as ceremonial centers where communities gathered for rituals connected with fertility, seasonal cycles, ancestor remembrance, or spiritual belief. Supporting this interpretation are discoveries of figurines, decorated pottery, animal bones, and evidence suggesting repeated ceremonial activity. Yet no single explanation accounts for every feature. Certain chambers appear especially restricted. Others contain unusual architectural elements whose purpose remains uncertain. Large stone altars have been identified within some Maltese temples, including features broadly comparable to those found elsewhere on the island. Whether these served religious offerings, communal ceremonies, or functions now impossible to reconstruct remains debated. The architecture itself encourages movement through space in carefully controlled ways. Visitors pass from open courtyards into progressively enclosed chambers. Doorways narrow. Walls curve inward. Light gradually changes. The experience feels intentional. Perhaps ceremonies unfolded according to carefully choreographed sequences understood only by participants. Perhaps different chambers served different stages of ritual. Without written explanations, the stones offer only subtle clues. Another enduring mystery involves the remarkable engineering displayed by these prehistoric builders. The temple walls consist of enormous limestone blocks, some weighing several tons. Metal tools had not yet become widespread. Wheeled transport was unknown. Yet the stones were quarried, shaped, transported, and positioned with extraordinary accuracy. How exactly did these island communities accomplish such ambitious construction? Experimental archaeology demonstrates several plausible methods involving rollers, sledges, levers, ropes, and coordinated labor. None require impossible technology. Even so, witnessing the finished structures still inspires admiration for the organizational skill involved. Every stone represents planning extending far beyond individual effort. The surrounding island environment may also hold important clues. Malta occupies a strategic position near the center of the Mediterranean, Yet, during the Temple period, its communities appear to have developed unusually distinctive cultural traditions. Their architecture differs dramatically from contemporary structures elsewhere in Europe. Their artistic styles possess unique characteristics. Their ceremonial practices seem highly specialized. This raises an intriguing possibility. Did the island's relative isolation encourage the development of religious traditions found nowhere else? Or were wider cultural influences once far more extensive than surviving evidence currently reveals? The discovery of small stone figurines has added another layer to the discussion. Some represent human forms with exaggerated physical features, leading earlier researchers to emphasize fertility symbolism. Modern scholarship approaches these interpretations more cautiously. The figurines could represent ancestors, deities, ritual participants, symbolic ideals, or concepts no longer recoverable through archaeology alone. Assigning precise meanings remains difficult. Objects separated from their original cultural context rarely reveal their full significance. Animal remains recovered from Skorba further complicate interpretation. Evidence suggests livestock played important roles within the community. Some bones appear associated with ceremonial deposits rather than ordinary food waste. Were animals offered during rituals? Did communal feasts accompany important seasonal gatherings? Or do these remains simply reflect everyday activities taking place near sacred structures? Different excavations support multiple possibilities. The temple's relationship with the surrounding landscape also deserves careful attention. Although Skorba lacks the dramatic cliffside setting of some archaeological sites, its placement appears far from accidental. Builders selected elevated ground overlooking nearby countryside, providing both visibility and connection to surrounding agricultural lands. For farming communities dependent upon seasonal rainfall and successful harvests, the landscape itself likely carried profound symbolic importance. The temples may have served as places where human activity and natural cycles became closely intertwined. Some researchers have explored possible astronomical connections. Throughout prehistoric Europe, numerous ceremonial monuments display alignments related to the rising or setting sun during significant points of the year. Certain architectural features at Maltese temples have encouraged similar investigations. While a few orientations appear potentially meaningful, archaeologists remain cautious. Not every alignment necessarily reflects deliberate astronomical planning. Even so, the possibility that sunlight interacted with temple interiors during particular seasons continues attracting scholarly interest. One of Skorba's greatest contributions lies not in spectacular architecture, but in its preservation of continuity. Unlike sites representing isolated moments, Skorba records centuries of gradual cultural evolution. Communities returned repeatedly. Buildings changed. Ideas developed. Traditions adapted. The sacred character of the location endured even as architecture evolved. This continuity suggests remarkable stability across generations. The place itself remained meaningful despite changing circumstances. Eventually, however, Malta's temple period came to an end. Around 2500 BC, construction of monumental temples ceased throughout the islands. The reasons remain uncertain. Climate change has been proposed. Environmental pressures, resource depletion, social transformation, migration, disease. Perhaps several factors combined. Archaeological evidence records the transition. It does not fully explain it. Why would a society capable of building some of humanity's earliest monumental temples abandon that tradition? The silence surrounding this cultural shift remains one of prehistoric Europe's enduring mysteries. Local traditions surrounding Skorba developed much later, long after the original builders had disappeared from memory. Stories occasionally associated ancient ruins with giants, supernatural builders, or forgotten civilizations possessing extraordinary abilities. Such legends appear throughout Malta, reflecting understandable attempts to explain monuments whose true origins had long been forgotten. While archaeology attributes the temples to highly organized prehistoric farming communities, folklore preserves the sense of wonder these structures have inspired for centuries. Independent researchers have occasionally proposed broader theories. Some imagine Malta functioning as a major ceremonial center, attracting visitors from distant Mediterranean regions. Others suggest that many prehistoric structures remain undiscovered beneath modern fields and villages, preserving an even larger ritual landscape. A few speculate that symbolic knowledge encoded within temple layouts remains only partially understood. Although these ideas remain speculative, continuing excavations repeatedly demonstrate that Malta's prehistoric heritage is richer than earlier generations imagined. Modern archaeological methods continue expanding understanding of Skorba. Microscopic analysis identifies plant remains preserved within ancient soils. Radiocarbon dating refines construction sequences. Chemical studies reveal the origins of materials. Three-dimensional mapping documents architectural relationships with increasing accuracy. Every technological advance adds another piece to a puzzle assembled slowly over decades. Yet perhaps the greatest lesson offered by Skorba is humility. Despite extraordinary scientific progress, many aspects of prehistoric belief remain beyond direct observation. No instrument can recover forgotten prayers. No excavation can fully restore vanished ceremonies. The stones preserve architecture. They cannot preserve every meaning. Today, the temple walls stand quietly beneath the Mediterranean sky, their weathered surfaces bearing witness to more than 5,000 years of changing seasons. Wild grasses grow where ceremonial gatherings may once have taken place, while sunlight moves across ancient limestone much as it did for the first builders. Every carefully placed stone reflects decisions made by people whose names, languages, and beliefs have almost entirely disappeared from history. Yet their achievements continue, inviting thoughtful investigation rather than certainty. Skorba reminds us that some of humanity's oldest sacred places still speak in whispers rather than declarations, leaving each generation to wonder whether the greatest discoveries lie not only beneath the earth, but within the questions these ancient monuments continue asking of us.